Okay, the channel is live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Adventure on So Many Levels. Tonight, we're going to take a look at a brand new currently crowdfunding tabletop RPG called Girl by Moonlight.
Yay!
Indeed.
I'm Christiana
Yes.
Ellis. Usually on the Saturdays, we are playing our Radiant Citadel campaign, which is very close to its big climax. But we are down a couple of players tonight, so we're going to be taking a look at this new game instead. We might do kind of a sort of practice session zero sort of thing, but we're mostly just taking a look at it. And um, and that's what we're going to do. Hopefully, we have one more player is going to join us tonight. But otherwise, we're just going to go ahead and get started while I send out a tweet. But yes, as mentioned, I'm Christiana Ellis. With us tonight, we have David Archambault,
Hello.
Lee Burdett,
Hello.
and Jason Banks.
Hello.
All right, so the important thing to know about Girl by Moonlight, other than the fact that it is currently crowdfunding with only a few days left on backerkit.com. So if anyone sees this and thinks it looks cool, you can get your own copy of the backer preview by backing the crowdfunding campaign. It is already funded, so that's, it doesn't need help getting over the line or anything, but if you want in on the ground floor, this is the way to do it. But the other thing to know about it is that it is mechanics wise very very much based on games like Blades in the Dark, in terms of you are building almost everything about it actually mechanically is very similar to Blades in the Dark and other Forged in the Dark games, but it has had what you might call a palette swap. The tone and setting is very different than the gritty, urban, ghost-filled, crime-ridden Blades in the Dark, and instead it is more based on the various and multiple ways that media has expressed the concept of magical girls. uh, so one quick little note on the idea of magical girls here. So, and we can take a look at the book's own thing. Why magical girls? Magical girls is basically it. It is probably most found in anime, but not exclusively. Partly because it has become so popular coming out of anime that lots of other places have kind of started to borrow from it. And it can express itself in lots of different ways. Probably the shortest version of what the idea is here. My dog is doing something. Rocket, off. Rocket, off. He's not getting off. There he goes. Okay, sorry about that. The basic idea is, generally speaking, the most typical part of anything that you would call magical girls is where you have a group of characters that have ordinary lives, but they also, at some point, also transform into an alter ego of sorts, superhero-like in some ways, to battle larger than life or supernatural threats, as well as dealing with their ordinary lives. And a big piece of the magical girl concept is that the show frequently gives pretty much equal weight to both sides of that. And so, obviously, it does not have to be A, a girl, or B, even magic for that matter, right? Because, for example, there are a whole lot of mecha animes where you could say that it's part of this basic genre, even though what's happening is it's a sci-fi setting and people are getting into giant robots. But it is the same basic idea where they have their life outside of the giant robot, and then they have the times where they get into the giant robot to do bigger things, right? So that's kind of what's going on here.
Something that just
popped to my mind is Power Rangers.
Oh yes, very much so.
Yeah, you know,
Now,
teenagers that you know do their Power Ranger and
yeah,
transformation, magical technology, and
yeah.
Yep.
And so one
Oh
of
yeah.
the most classic examples of this is Sailor Moon, right? Like, and that's, but that has the girls who are all in a high school, but then they all have their magical transformation sequence that they then use to go and fight the enemies. The enemies which are frequently drawn from and interlinked with their ordinary lives, right? Like there's a supernatural threat, but the way it expresses itself in their world is by threatening the things they care about in their ordinary lives, right? Or reflecting the things in their ordinary lives in some way. So, like, there's commonly like a theme where something that they're struggling with in their ordinary life is kind of reflected thematically by whatever the big monster is that week or whatever they're actually doing. Not always, but often. So that's kind of, I said, I turned to this page and then didn't actually read from it. But so what is this? It says this game builds on the magical girl genre in which we see young women with magical powers transform into an alter ego to fight evil. The game reinterprets the classic examples of the genre to create an allegory for self-discovery and queer identity. This text uses magical girl as a shorthand, but your magical girls need not be girls necessarily. Rather, they are people whose identities put them at the margins. They must conceal their true selves, conforming to the world's suffocating expectations, even as they work in secret to transform them. To help portray the struggles of our heroes, the game introduces two complementary ideas, transcendence and eclipse. When a magical girl casts off the compromises of their day-to-day life and embraces their true self, they transcend. They take on a new form and tap into the power needed to change the world, maybe even save it. But when the responsibility and expectations become too much to bear, their light is overwhelmed by inner turmoil and they fall into eclipse. They make fatalistic choices, give in to doubt and fear, and turn away from their lofty ideals. Sometimes they are undone by their own hopes and dreams. In Girl by Moonlight, failure and heartbreak are just as likely as triumph or redemption. And so that's kind of the concept that underlies this. But one of the things that I think is kind of neat about the way that this particular game is set up is it includes, as part of this base book, what they call series playsets. And the basic idea there is that the book does not provide just kind of one setting or even theme, because as kind of just discussed, magical girls in general can encompass quite a variety of different stories in terms of what's happening, what things look like, in the setting, and even like the tone, like how dark is it, how serious is it, that that sort of thing. Could be light and funny, could be really grim and gritty. The genre allows for all of that, and so it has different series play sets to kind of encourage different ways to look at it. But with having said all of that, let's maybe just go around the table here and talk a little bit about like what background do you have at all in this genre, and or what are your favorites? And of course, let's start with Jason.
Oh, as the resident anime dude, I don't know, man. You know, not mad at a classic. Sailor Moon's really good, but there's some newer stuff. Like there's one where there's a boy who's actually a magical girl who then jumps into a giant mech, and he is known as the it's like the Ginga Bishonen, which is like the super pretty boy or something like that.
Which one is that? Or is that the title of it?
Yeah, it's called Star Driver.
Okay, nice.
And he gets a really cool paramilitary uniform, very similar to one of the characters from Persona 5. Like it's actually pretty cool.
Nice. How about you, Lee?
Gosh, Sailor Moon, of course. Magic Knight Rayearth was one of my favorites. back in the day because
Mhm.
oh gosh, I mean that included like the soldier power up and the mech aspect. It was awesome. Um, I want to say Cardcaptor Sakura as well.
Yeah.
You could say was one as well. My mind is blanking now that you've kind of
No, that's all right. Like the other piece of this, of course, is that we're not necessarily looking to just copy any particular thing. You
Yeah.
know, it's all a soup that surrounds us.
Yeah.
How about you, David? I know we were just discussing before the stream that you had not watched much anime, but just thoughts, feelings on the concept as
Well,
discussed so
I
far.
mean, like I have, I've seen people discussing stuff like Sailor Moon and
Mhm.
other things, and so I understand it. It's just I have not actually seen a lot. So,
Mhm.
general stuff, I would I have an understanding of, but like if specific references, I'll probably just respond like other people because like, oh hey, yeah.
Uh, so, and I mean that's totally fine. Like you know, there's no foreknowledge required here. I think the book does a pretty good job of having just everything in the book tell you what you kind of need to know about the theme. And after all, we're not necessarily trying to set a game in a specific universe or something, so it's not like you need to know details. It's just it's a feel. Like for my own part, I definitely have enjoyed a number of anime that are kind of fall into this category. But just to illustrate that it is not only anime, you have anime influenced Western cartoons. For example, Steven Universe, which is actually name checked in this show, is and that's another example where the main character Steven is a boy, right? But it doesn't matter that he's not a girl. Like that's not what the genre is about, even though often the characters are women. Partly just because the idea here is that there is something about their ordinary lives that already has them on the margins a little bit. They're struggling with something. They're trying to make it work. They feel different. And then something about when they embrace their power is when they're like their true selves. And then they have to hide that from the rest of the world during the other time. And so that's not as much like, whereas, Stephen isn't hiding per se, but he has his whole struggles about how, like, he had a pretty weird upbringing compared to other kids his age, which he is interested in knowing about, but he really has no frame of reference of saying, what's it like to go to school? And so, in any case, I think that's a good example, too. So, I think for the purpose of what we're hoping to do tonight, kind of walking through this, I think what makes sense to do first would be to take a look at, I guess here's the question. Do we want to look at the mechanics first, or do we want to look at the series playsets first?
I'm not sure, but like with regards to the genre itself, you could say like superhero, because
Yeah.
like the magical girl transformation, Iron Man's first
Mhm.
first
Yeah.
shooting up.
There's
It's like,
definitely some parallel and common themes.
Now, the play sets are kind of like the overall setting for the adventure, correct?
Well, yeah. So it's not even really a setting because you decide lots of things about them.
Yeah.
It's more like the flavor. Like each of the 4 play sets has a different tone, and so let's just go. Let's maybe start there and take a look at each and what it says about each in the quick introduction here, and then we can maybe decide from there which one we want to explore more. At the brink of the abyss is heroic magical girls reclaiming a corrupted world. At the brink of the abyss is about redemption and heroism. It has an optimistic outlook in which monsters have hearts, often fragile, broken hearts in need of healing. The transcendent powers of the protagonists are a pure and truly good thing, and they use that power to change the world for the better. There's still danger and struggle, but ultimately the series aims for an uplifting and optimistic narrative. And then touchstones include Steven Universe by Rebecca Sugar and Sailor Moon by Naoko Takeuchi. Compared to Beneath a Rotting Sky, tragic magical girls doomed to an inevitable fate. Beneath the Rotting Sky is about tragedy and betrayal. Most, if not all, of the characters will be complicit in the world's oppression with little hope of redemption. The protagonist's own power plays a role in their undoing, and their story ends with an almost inevitable tragic fate. Though this series is bleak, there is still struggle and triumph, and moments of brightness made all the more luminous against the backdrop of a crumbling world. And the touchstones there, Puella Magi Madoka Magica, which we were talking briefly about off stream, as I think Jason's the only one of us that's seen that, and he recommended that it was sad. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Well, given the description of the, of the setting,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So if that is the
Sounds
touchstone for so and then the next playset here is we talked about mechs. So it's like mecha pilots on a sea of stars. Mecha pilots struggling against extinction at the hands of the Leviathans. On a Sea of Stars is about institutions and hope in the face of extinction. The protagonists are captive heroes forced to fight a slowly losing war against an overwhelming enemy, the Leviathans, all while being alienated from the people they protect. They rely on the engines to stand a chance against their foes, and the engines in turn are fueled by their pilots' emotions and transcendent powers. And the touchstones they list here are D-Buster or Die-Buster by Kazuya Tsurumaki, and The Vision of Escaflowne by Kazuki Akane.
These descriptions, I'm having flashbacks.
Yeah?
Oh,
And
yeah,
last but not
Oh,
least
good.
here, In a Maze of Dreams, dream travelers seeking the truth of a magical conspiracy. In a Maze of Dreams is about desire, mass culture, and ideas developing a life of their own. It is filled with guarded hearts whose truth can only be found in dreams. The protagonists have learned to take refuge in those dreams, but now find themselves tangled up in the conspiracy, a multifarious, sinister plot, a virus of human thoughts. They must unravel the conspiracy, lest it devour our dreams and make a nightmare of the waking world. Touchstones, Paprika by Satoshi Kon, and Serial Experiments, Lane by Ryotaro Nakamura. That's one where shoot, and I was just going to say it made me think of another thing, and then now it just disappeared.
Persona 5?
That yes, Persona. The
I
Persona
thought
games is
part
what I
of a
was.
like a Let's Play of it,
Mhm.
and that seems to be a lot like this.
Yeah. I've only played Persona 4, but yeah, that series seems like it falls into this category.
Oh yeah. Or if you've seen things like Requiem for a Dream, definitely fall into that category because it takes a lot from Paprika. But yeah, I like that one. I also like the one with touches of Escaflowne because who doesn't like knights, King Arthur's knights with mechs?
Yeah. So of these four that are presented here in the book, does anyone immediately have any of them that they would like to go ahead and veto and say we don't want to do that one, and B, any of them that you say, oh, definitely want to do X?
I don't know if I like Beneath the Rotting Sky.
Fair. That does seem like it. Like it's dark enough that it's we could imagine time and place where that might be cool, but maybe not tonight.
But conversely, I kind of like At the Brink of the Abyss.
Yeah. I heard a yeah from Lee. Does that you co-sign that suggestion?
I co-signed that. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So is that the one we want to kind of look more at then for?
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
All right, cool. So let's from there briefly talk about the mechanics. I don't want to spend too much time on that because A, it's very much like Blades in the Dark for anyone who knows that already, and B, we're not actually going to be doing any of those roles tonight. But having a little bit of an understanding of like what the actions are, I think contributes to an understanding of what the game will be like, and then also it helps to know what the different when you're looking at character sheets and what the different abilities are. Kind of knowing how the rules work help you understand what it's actually giving you. So, core systems. Very much like in many tabletop role-playing games, you have various actions that you can take, and you're rolling dice to determine how well you do. But in this game, well, here, I'm going to just briefly pull up the comparison of Blades in the Dark because it's, it's the obvious contrast here. And I just wanted to list what the actions are in that game. Attune, command, consort, finesse, hunt, prowl, skirmish, study, survey, sway, tinker, and wreck. So there's definitely like a tone conveyed just by saying like those are the things. Those are the categories of things, right? Whereas in this game, notably, the actions are confess, forgive, perceive, express, defy, empathize, conceal, flow, and analyze. So talk about a different feel, huh? Obviously, like there's a lot of emotionally driven stuff in there. This would still be a case where just about anything that you're doing in one of these games, it's, they describe it as fiction forward, which means that you describe what your character is doing almost like we're watching a TV show about it, right? And then we decide which of the actions best reflects that, as opposed to games like Dungeons and Dragons, which can work like that, but more often tend to work like your character sheet has a list of the things you can do and you're choosing from them, more like ordering a menu, right? And that's fine. Both are legitimate ways to play, but like that's just kind of how this does. So the idea of this, the categories that you divide the actions into is definitely always going to influence the flavor of play, in my experience. So when you are creating your character, you're going to have some number of points in each of those actions. And they are divided into 3 categories: sun, moon, and stars, where sun represents a character's compassion and resolve. You roll sun when you resist a consequence of violence or fear. Moon represents a character's sincerity and clarity. You roll moon when you resist a consequence of despair or heartbreak. And stars represents a character's cleverness and elegance, and you roll stars when you resist a consequence of panic or social pressure. So, again, lots of emotional stuff in this one. But the basic mechanic is however many points you have in the given action, you roll that many d6s. And the goal is that you going to use the highest number out of all the dice you roll. If it gets a 6, that's a perfect success. If you get a 4 or a 5, then it's a mixed success. A 1 through 3 is a failure. That's the basic idea. There's lots of different kinds of rolls. There's ways that you can get more dice or fewer dice to contribute to that roll. You also have various abilities. You have stress and all of that, but we're not going to necessarily get into all of that right now unless we feel like it later. But that's the basic idea. And every time you do a roll, you determine whether you're a controlled position, risky position, or desperate position. And what that means is that if something goes wrong, how bad will it be, right? If it's a controlled position, then probably even if you mess it up, it's not too big a deal. But if it's a desperate, you might really be in trouble, right? And then by contrast, you also establish the effect. You're going to have a limited effect, standard effect, or great effect, right? And this is all extremely, it's basically exactly how Blades in the Dark or other Forged in the Dark games work. Okay. And then this game's version of what Blades in the Dark calls the Devil's Bargain is called a Poisoned Promise. And it does work a little differently because the basic idea here is that anytime you are doing a move, usually what happens in Blades in the Dark is if you're making a move, you can ask for a Devil's Bargain or the GM might offer one. But in this case, it's actually the director, the GM, or any other player can offer a bonus die to any action roll by attaching a poisoned promise. And basically what that means is that you are accepting some additional complication to the story in exchange for rolling one more die when you do your roll. And so that's always a little tricky because the thing is the new complication that you add is guaranteed, but the extra die still might roll bad. But that's basically how that works. And then there's harm and consequences, and you can always, anytime there's a consequence, you can roll to resist a consequence, and you are spending stress to do that, and you only have so much stress, etc. And that's basically the mechanic there. Is this working for you guys, or am I kind of like lecturing and it would be more interesting to move on to some other piece? Or is this useful?
Yeah, no, this is useful because I've never played Blades in the Dark.
Okay. Yeah. So when we played Apocalypse Road Trip, it was actually kind of a streamlined version of this. But in any case, so there's also teamwork. There's ways that you can help each other or do group actions. But here's where we start to get into stuff that's specific to this game is the transcendence, because your character, as we established, has their sort of ordinary version of themselves, and then they have their transcended version of themselves. And so it is an exultant expression of everything that the characters are forced to bury and deny about themselves in their day-to-day lives. And so essentially, every protagonist can activate their transcendence once per mission, and they choose when they want to do it before, and you can choose to do it before you have to make an action roll. And so there might be different details about it. It might work slightly differently depending on which playset you're using. But essentially what happens is that's when your character has their magical transformation. They become their more powerful self. And you have different abilities that you can do only when you're transcended. There's also, you have your sort of armor, which is just another kind of resource that you can spend in certain ways. And there are some action ratings that you can only do when you're transcended. But the increased effect level against supernatural opposition, part of this is just the expectation of if there is a big monster rampaging through the school cafeteria and throwing tables against the wall and stuff like that, and you're still in your ordinary high schooler self, going up and punching it, probably not going to do very much, even if you roll well, right? But once you're transcended, it's understood that now you're powerful, and so now even a mixed success might actually have an effect, right? So you just treat it that way fictionally, right? What makes sense in each mode of your character. But the thing is, when you are transcended, you choose when you do it, but you can only do it once per mission. And every time you make an action roll while transcended, you advance your transcendence track. And what that means is that if you run out of your transcendence track and the threat is still going, you revert to your ordinary self and have to finish with it that way.
Oh, man.
Yeah. You also have in this game what they call links. These are things that it's actually a little bit similar to the relationships that are in the Apocalypse Keys game, where when you are in downtime, you can do the make a connection move with your fellow PCs, and you generate these links, which become a resource that you can use to do certain things. like recover stress, shrug off harm, helping someone with a move, or lending strength. And so that's what's meant by links in this case. And then you also have to worry about going into Eclipse. So in this game, so what happens in Blades in the Dark when you have used up all your stress and cannot take any more is usually that something happens that means your character has to leave the scene and they would come back with a trauma. Like they can no longer help in whatever the current situation is. They're not dead, but they can't help anymore. And that could mean they are knocked unconscious. It could mean they're blasted off down the hillside and it's going to take them so long to climb back up that they can't help anymore. It could be something like that. But in this, it's interesting. So instead, when you fill up the limits of your stress track, you have to do a special roll and you risk falling into Eclipse. And that is when you fall into Eclipse, your inner turmoil and self-destruction manifests. Each playbook has a unique when you Eclipse prompt that describes the mindset that takes hold of your character while they are in Eclipse. And then it also explains what needs to happen to bring you out of it. And it's usually that someone else has to do something for you. And so that is basically, a big part of this genre too, is that, everything is so emotionally driven that what happens when someone just can't take anymore, and they have their flaws start to become all the more self-destructive and they're going to not, maybe they're still helping, but they're helping in complicated ways that maybe they stop worrying about collateral damage, or maybe they get, they're still fighting, but they're mean about it, like that sort of thing. And so the idea is that if you are in Eclipse, you can keep playing, you're still going, but you are having to role play those elements. And there's some different rules about that. But then you also have basically a reverse transcendence track where you can actually keep using your transcended form for longer. But if you run out of your track again while in Eclipse, then you die. Or are lost. They can take no more and they die, or they lose their magical powers and return heartbroken to mundane life, or they betray their companions and side with the adversaries. So obviously, there's a little bit of a balance there where in the heat of a fight, if someone's about to turn back to their normal self and you need that firepower a little longer, going into Eclipse for a little while might actually be helpful, but but you run the risk of the higher stakes, and you have to deal with that emotional damage. Hello, Nobilis, welcome.
Oh, so sorry, I lost track of time.
That is all right. So we were just going through this Girl by Moonlight book, talking a little bit about the mechanics, but what we did to begin, though, is we kind of went around and had everyone sort of give their own sort of history and or favorites of the magical girl genre. Is that something you feel qualified to do, or do we need to brief you on the concept?
I mean, you can't be in fandom these days without having some exposure to magical girl. But I've never actually sat down and watched more than an episode or so of anything except parodies.
Well,
so,
I'll suggest to you that you have, because I know for a fact you watched Steven Universe.
okay,
And that is literally one of the touchstones of the playset that we've
Fine.
chosen to explore.
that's I have watched almost all of Steven Universe.
Yeah.
That's true.
So in any case, we of the various series playsets that are in this book, we chose to explore further the first one, which is At the Brink of the Abyss, I think is what it was called. Anyway, the first one. Yeah. So if you wanted to flip around, that's... but right now we are just talking kind of about the mechanics. So glad you were able to join us. If you have questions of stuff that we've covered already, that's okay. Feel free to ask. But in the meantime, there's, let's see, I think we've kind of covered the basic mechanics, which are basically extremely similar to Blades in the Dark, except flavored very differently. And so, like, armor. So when transcended, which is basically when your character has had their magical transformation, right? The protagonists have armor against physical harm. You can mark an armor box to reduce or avoid an appropriate consequence without rolling to resist. Special armor is usually a specific thing related to which playbook you have chosen. All right. So, and then clocks is a basic thing of how you measure progress towards things. You know, usually if you say, you have a group of the bad guys' minions that are trying to slow you down, and you're trying to get through them to catch a boat that's about to leave the docks. And do you get through the minions in time to stop the boat or get on the boat? Well, what you might have is a clock that represents when the boat is going to leave, and a clock that represents how much the minions are interfering. And so when you make moves, you would fill the clock of dealing with the minions as you make successful moves there. And then if something bad happens, you add segments to the clock of the boats getting away, right? So that's basic idea there. And there are different sizes of clocks with different segments to reflect different things. Okay. That's, I think, probably enough to talk about with like the basic action rolls and everything. And so the phases of play is another critical piece we want to touch on, which is there's 4 phases that repeat to form the rhythm of the game: obligation, downtime, missions, and fallout. And then each time you do that sequence, that's called an episode. And then you have various tracks that accumulate or increase or decrease as you do each episode. And then you reach a point of climax at which you sort of wrap a bigger plot point up, and then that's called a season. Pretty straightforward, right? Because we're kind of drawing from a lot of that sort of influence here. But so what is obligation? Obligation is the phase where we see not merely the protagonists in their day-to-day lives, but specifically what are the things that are causing them problems in their day-to-day lives. What are the things that they have to do even though it's a bummer? Or what's the problem that they're having right now? Is it, oh my gosh, I have a math test coming up and I've just been so busy fighting monsters that I haven't had time to study. And if I don't get good grades, my parents are going to be mad at me. That sort of thing. Like, it could be that, or it could be more serious. It could, like, depending on which place that you're in, it could be very serious, right? But the idea is just whatever you're dealing with in obligation phase is the problems of the mundane, ordinary life, and how are you handling those? And so basically what happens mechanically is that however you've assigned your attributes, sun, moon, or stars is going to, whichever one is the lowest, you roll the number of dice associated with that, and you see how good your roll is to determine how much stress you are taking as a result of dealing with those obligations. And then you would usually do a scene to reflect that, right? So, and if you're rolling sun, your obligation involves scary people or circumstances or is physically taxing. If moon is rolled, your obligation breaks your heart and drives you to despair. If stars is rolled, your obligation puts you under social pressure or sets off your anxiety. And then you have the downtime phase, which is still kind of in the ordinary world, but it's kind of the part where, what are the things that you do to kind of get past the parts that are a bummer, right? What do you do to work towards your bigger goals? What do you do to recover some of the stress that you just took? And this is where you're going to do various things like make a connection, which builds the links that we talked about earlier. Help a friend recover. This is another bit where, if you have taken harm or an injury or something like that, the someone else uses a downtime action to help you recover. So you don't choose a recover as your downtime action. One of your teammates has to use one of theirs, which I think is interesting. Work on a long-term project, and that's something you would usually reflect with a clock. An investigation is part of what you're doing to try to study what your enemies are actually planning in the whole thing. And that's how you progress the season, broadly speaking, is by increasing the investigation track. And then the third phase is missions. And that's where something is actually happening. You need to go do a thing, or you need to respond to some new threat. And this is the part where you're going to start with an engagement roll to see how it gets started. And then you cut to the action, and you're doing your various action rolls. And then at some point in the mission, you probably will do your transcendence. And then you're dealing with the threat until the threat has either been dealt with or you are forced to withdraw. Flashbacks is one of the things that's like Blades in the Dark, where especially because this game encourages you to just jump right into the action, sometimes what you can do is spend stress to say, actually, this was something that happened before that helps us now. And the game has a mechanic designed to allow that to happen, and it just costs stress to do. And then the fallout is the fourth phase, which is basically once the mission is over, what, if any, consequences were they? Did the high school bully discover your true identity? Did, was there a lot of damage to the stage? I don't know why I'm assuming it's in a high school necessarily, but it's a common setting. But like maybe the monster fight wrecked the stage and now the school play can't happen, right? It could be, the idea is what's the fallout? And usually there's going to be some mundane level fallout, and then there's going to be the adversaries, what are they doing about it, right?
How many blocks were destroyed by the monster rampaging through the city?
Yeah, exactly. It could be. So, yeah, in the Fallout phase, we see the consequences of the group's mission. Their adversary closes in on them, seeking to snuff out the opposition they represent. Other complications and consequences also arise following the group's effort. And so that marks, and doing the Fallout phase marks the end of an episode and a launching point for the events of the next episode. And so that's basically the idea. There's also an adversary track, which is kind of a parallel to the investigation track, because the idea is your characters are trying to figure out what's going on with the adversary. Meanwhile, the adversary is trying to do something of their own. And so different things can cause your investigation track to increase or decrease, and same with the adversary track. But the basic idea is that by increasing the investigation track, you can start taking on more and more serious missions that have more of a chance of actually hurting the adversary's interests instead of only reacting to them. But at the same time, as the adversary track fills up, it gives them more information about where you are, to the point where maybe they can start striking at you, suddenly, like that sort of thing. So that's the basic idea. Then there's also, you get XP and advancement, which would be basically taking new powers from your playbook, etc. And we already chose our series playset, which was At the Brink of the Abyss is the one that we're going to kind of explore in this, tonight. But does anyone have any questions about the mechanics before we move on?
Not right now, but I reserve the right to be confused later.
Oh, well. Lee.
Seconded.
I want
All in
to,
favor?
okay. All of you,
Motion passes.
I hope that it can go without saying, but I will say it regardless. All of you have that right at all times.
Okay.
Oh, we've never failed to exercise that right in the past. I don't
Yes,
think why no anything would change
absolutely
now.
Yeah. So, I think that maybe what sounds fun to me to do next is we can go to our other PDF here, which is the playbooks, series reference, etc. First of all, I want to suggest to all of you that if you go to the very last page of this PDF, this rules reference is extremely good. This is a very good rules reference page in terms of summarizing the basic ways that roles work, what the actions are, and basically as a quick reference, I just think it's an extremely good one. So I'll just kind of point that out. But each of the series playsets has a couple of pages worth of stuff for it that are in the back half of this PDF. So let's actually start there and not with the individual playbooks, which are what's up front here. But at the brink of the abyss is where we're going to start. This is where we would start designing, like, what is our setting? What is the whole deal of it? And so you see we have fields for the abyss, its subjects, the mundane world, what's sacred, what's profane, etc. So the book has prompts for all of these, which we're going to flip back to in a moment. But I just wanted to point out that we have this page where we are now going to go through this exercise and create a setting to fit with the At the Brink of the Abyss playset. And all of that would go here if we had form fillable PDFs instead of just the backer cable, the preview ones. Mm-hmm. Does that all sound cool?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. And then once we have a setting, I think that's where we will be in a better position to start thinking about who our specific characters would be. Okay, so At the Brink of the Abyss. Why play this series? Because we love seeing fantasy elements in a mundane setting, like in classic magical girl stories. We want a dramatic story where pure hearts can triumph in the end. We want to redeem a broken world, changing it for the better. That all sounds fun to me.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So, building the series. As a group, select an option for each of these questions and elaborate on them as needed. Can we have someone volunteer as like a scribe to just kind of write down what we decide for each of these?
If I can find a notebook, I will gladly do it,
Sure.
says the college student.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I can
Jason is
try.
volunteering if he finds a notebook, I guess.
Okay.
Or how about any of you can also feel free to write it down. I just wanted to make sure at least one person was doing it.
Even got a pen.
Awesome. Okay, so that means we now are going to ask ourselves each of these questions, and then we'll decide as a group what would best reflect the story that we are imagining beginning in this situation. So, first, what lies in the abyss? And the examples they offer are an eternity of pain, an endless hungering, the poisoned heart of a world, a grand cosmic order, a cruel and ancient deity, a twisted reflection of our reality. So the abyss is our adversary. This is the evil, not even just like the villain, but this is the evil forces. So do any of those leap out at anyone as something that seems cool?
Because I was talking about this show the other day, I'm thinking a alternate world of our evil selves, but they all have goatees, like this was an episode of Hercules, The Legendary Journeys.
Okay, so I was gonna. So it's a little bit like it's a magical fantasy version of the Mirror Mirror universe too.
Yeah, and they want to replace us. Throw a
okay.
little us in there.
Because they're all evil, so they want to take us over. Because evil.
Because we have the good life, we have the good side.
All right,
good
cool.
side of things.
Yeah, because they're evil, they've made their version of our world a mess. So they want to take over where we have it relatively speaking, better. Okay, cool. That works for me. Anyone have any more thoughts we want to refine there, or?
I think.
One of my thoughts is like, if you're gonna do like the mirror universe kind of thing, basically, kind of kind of got a hand wave how like it if you really did things opposite, things wouldn't really work.
Well,
Right. It's not
But
opposite in every
it's
way. It's just
right.
opposite in the
Yeah.
in the
Well, and I think what's worth noting, and honestly, if we're talking about the Star Trek Mirror Mirror example, DS9 handles this better than any of the other shows, I think, that do the Mirror Mirror, because it reflects the idea that our world is not all good. It has bad stuff in it. And so by contrast, the evil version has good stuff in it, but it's perhaps sublimated more than in ours, and it is represented perhaps by different people, right? And so it's complex there, and yes, it is not literally like the physical equivalent of every coin flip landed the other way. It's more
Well,
just
It's not like
my
DC's
thoughts like
Bizarro world, which is just
yeah,
way too
my
weird.
thoughts like where every act of kindness gets mirrored with an act of malice.
yeah. I think it's more like I think maybe a better one way to look at it would be kind of like a photo negative, right? You know, it's not the exact reverse. It's just the proportions are all flipped.
Nega Scott.
Yeah.
Yes, a good example where if you're someone who is actually kind of on the line between good and bad already, then your reverse probably is also.
I mean, I'd argue that Scott is actually kind of an asshole, and that's why Nega Scott is a good guy.
Anyway, yes. So, but yes, I think we agree that this is not like literally some kind of a mirror image or the idea that every decision got made the other way. It's more just a reflection of every person does seem to have an alternate version of themselves for the most part. Maybe not, maybe there are exceptions, but that their counterpart tends to, be evil where our version is good.
Except for the mayor, who's a power hungry asshole in our universe, but he's embedded in a world of mostly kind people, so therefore he doesn't really do much. And in the mirror universe, he's the lone.
Maybe he's a resistance leader.
Philanthropist.
Yeah.
He's the mayor from Powerpuff Girls.
Yeah. So in any case, I think
that's another magical girl series that I've watched. Okay.
so. We've kind of touched on this already, but so the next question would be, what is the Abyss's agenda? And so it offers, to see its emptiness reflected in others, to sterilize and preserve, to rule in glory, to propagate and thrive, to order the universe, or to exact retribution.
I think I think to propagate and thrive, tinged with to see its emptiness reflected in others.
Okay, yeah. So there's
We've
maybe
already kind of gone down that road.
right. So there's this idea of like we're conquering you to take your stuff, but there's also a little bit, especially because this game is so emotionally driven. There is an aspect of it of you think you're better than us, we'll show you, like that sort of thing. Maybe does that sound right for everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So the next question would be, who are its harbingers?
I would like to actually skip that one because
Okay.
because we've already decided it's kind of a reflection.
Well,
And
but
go on to the mundane world first and then come back.
but that doesn't necessarily mean that our team is always fighting their doppelgangers, right? I don't think that's
okay. Well, okay. Yeah, I see your point.
and I think its harbingers in this context are not even so much necessarily what you might be fighting week to week as much as who's in charge over there that's driving this. And that might be any number of things that don't have to necessarily coincide with our doppelgangers.
I like disgraced royalty.
Disgraced royalty, yeah. Is that
I
fit?
I don't. I'm not sure what the other options are.
Oh, well, so the other choices it lists are disgraced royalty, interstellar invaders, travelers from a cursed future, a court of petty gods, saints and their attendant priests, and the forces of a peerless general.
Forces of a Peerless General would also work.
Hmm.
I like Forces of a Fearless General.
Yeah,
You know what would be kind of interesting as a broad, like, series level mystery for that is what if we know that their forces are being led by someone really super badass and evil, and we don't know who their counterpart is in our world.
Yeah. That would be
So, like, but like we know that someone is in charge over there, and they're super scary and powerful and leading the charge, but we don't know who they are. Like
Yeah, I like that.
we know that they're in armor or something like that, but we don't
Yeah.
know who's behind the mask.
Yeah.
That's fun to me. I like
I
that.
like that.
Okay, so the mundane world. We choose one or two of these. It suggests an ancient city, an authoritarian government, religious hierarchy, class struggle, a rural community, or a futuristic megacity. Now, remember, too, as we discussed with that obligation phase, just because we're saying that our world is sort of the good one and the other one is the bad one, certainly does not mean that everything's hunky-dory in ours, right? So it's got to still have its own problems.
I love Steven Universe so much that I love a rural community.
Hmm?
Rural community just really appeals to me at all that.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we
I
want
mean,
to do we want to add some one of these other things to that? There's also the possibility, because you could theoretically have a rural community on the outskirts of a futuristic megacity, right? For example.
Well, which is kind of Steven Universe.
Yeah.
But, how about instead of on the edge of a futuristic Magic City, how about the edge of an ancient city?
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Like
Maybe one that's not entirely inhabited. It's
Mhm.
On the, one of the things there's a book recently called Forgotten Cities, I think it is, that it points out that all the cities
Five
that we
lost
count
cities.
as ruined,
Or no, 4 lost cities.
lost cities, yeah, by and Newitz,
Annaline.
Annalee Newitz,
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Never
a
mind.
good
I have a book that was not quite called that, and it's not that book, but I was just
in
trying
any
to
case,
see if I
points
grab
out
it.
that all of the cities that are around the world that we consider lost had people living there when they were quote unquote discovered,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, oh yeah, this place has been here all. What do you mean you discovered it? We've been here.
Yeah.
So
And the only one in that book that's mentioned that was that's an exception was Pompeii, and that's because the
Got
the
Well, 'cause
volcano
everybody
very
made
ball
it basically
volcano. Yeah.
uninhabitable.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
but
Um,
yeah,
But yeah, I do kind of like that idea that um, it is a rural community. Do we want to say that it's like literally in the ruins of an ancient city, or is it just nearby?
like
I like the
there's-
idea of
Well-
that you have this rural community, and in the background are these monstrous walls
and
that look like they
monoliths
had to have
and
been built
temples
by
and-
giants.
Well, so here's another thing that I think we kind of maybe all sort of instinctively saw an ancient city and assumed it must be ruins, but it doesn't have to be, right?
No.
It could be an ancient city that has been there for, centuries and centuries that is still absolutely occupied and people do still live there, but it's just, the building where you buy your groceries 800 years ago used to be an armory.
Yeah.
So that an ancient city could still be an active lived-in city, not necessarily ruins.
Oh yeah, I mean,
right, but
Yeah.
still, but I think not. It's not at its prime, right?
Yeah.
There's places and areas that are abandoned, that
Mhm.
are not in the best repair.
Do we
But
think?
there's also like monuments and temples and fortifications
Sure.
all
Do we
around.
think there was maybe perhaps some technology that allowed the city to thrive that is no longer available and hasn't been for a while? And so people still live there in the parts that can be readily used, but that's why it can't support the same population density as before or something like
Well,
that?
kind of um, going back to the book about the lost cities has one of the first cities wound up getting abandoned because uh, there was a shift in climate that made the surrounding areas less fertile,
Mm-hmm.
less able to produce food. So people left because they went to
Ooh.
find other.
What if and you know this potentially has the risk of feeling a little too real maybe, but what if it was a coastal city that is now largely flooded? And so
Ooh, I like that.
we're on the part that is still on the land because it's kind of the outskirts, but the ruin like a whole bunch of what used to be a big city is now only sort of sporadically occupied because it got flooded.
Look, guys, we can do a better water world.
I
We
my
can
thought was
do a
that
better water
my
world.
thought was
and
AI,
and
Yeah,
which
AI, sure, yeah.
well, normally when that happens, people just kind of move back, they move
Yeah.
inland. But what
Hmm.
if it's on an island and it's like there's just no further place to,
Well,
what's left is of dry land is at the center of this.
well,
Maybe it's, the what was on the mountaintops before, which
yeah.
was government centers and temples and all these really important places, and what's further out is kind of less so. But now, because the population has shrunk so much, you've got Joe the corner grocer who's set up in the temple of the sun god.
Do,
Or like in or like with Blade Runner when he gets the Chinese, but it's the guy he like just pulls up to him in the like floating cart. Like these guys are in like boats and like
mhm.
Yeah,
these
lot of that
small
kind of
little
stuff, and people inhabiting
Oh
gondolas.
top
yeah, so
levels
like
of tall
what if
buildings.
our rural community is people who live in the upper levels of skyscrapers that are now connected with bridges and stuff?
and
Yeah,
Ooh.
bridges and boats
and
and
the
Yeah.
zip lines and stuff like
and the
that. Yeah,
elite live in like the upper parts away from the water, like where down on like the lower levels where it's like
Hmm.
zip lines and boats and bridges and like
Hmm.
this sort of
Oh.
making
So there's a
the
little bit of a Venice situation,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
but set in a place that used to be a megacity before it flooded.
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
what if the maybe the poor communities, they're having to dig out and reinforce the internal, so they're actually living underwater.
Or there are some people at least that do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know what? I was just about to say something that I realize is going to get covered in a minute. So I love this concept though. So let's keep moving though. So, uh, the next question is, what is held to be sacred? And this is one or two things. And when we say what is held to be sacred, we mean by the people who live in the mundane world, not us specifically, because there's actually some nuance to that we're going to cover in a minute. But so the average person, the culture of the mundane world that we're talking about, what is held to be sacred, and it suggests order, power, tradition, control, edifices, organizations, achievement, privilege.
I think edifices is pretty obvious.
Oh yeah.
And
But-
privilege also.
Well, so
Because it
so
disclosed
like
privilege, I don't
privilege.
think is obvious,
Well,
but
like I
Yeah.
think privilege being if that were something that was being held to be sacred, I think that would be something where culturally it's been built in the idea that the rich people who get the best stuff and live at the tops and everything are that way because they deserve it. Like it's right that that's how it is.
and I think edifices is better because it's like
well, we can choose two.
we
Right. Well, and I mean, like the thing that I just described is absolutely a legitimate way to have our world be. I'm just saying, like,
I
I think
just
that's my interpretation of the question.
yeah I just I don't really like the thought of people who live up top and have the and live
Yeah,
dry, as you might say.
Hmm.
I would like a
So
little
that way
more
we can
optimistic world, to be
yeah.
honest.
Well, it's
Yeah.
true,
But
and the other thing is to that's like that I was going to kind of chime in on this a little bit some extent is that once we start talking about like our characters, to some extent, part of the whole idea is that our characters are going to be trying to change the world for the better,
uh,
right?
Yeah.
one of the options was hierarchy, right?
Well, yeah,
Organizations.
organizations, yeah.
Well, my thought, like, it's like it is the duty of those above to help support the edifices of those below. So,
Hmm.
like, you have the
Well,
resources to live high. You know, you make sure that the people who live below you have what's needed to reinforce the structure, reinforce the edifices.
So maybe along those lines, maybe we have a situation where even though this community is not like huge now, maybe there's an element to which each building is kind of like a micro community within the broader community where the person who is like in charge of that building is trying to maintain that building so that like because the thing is with this flooded city part of the worry would be that under the water the building is decaying and is going to eventually tip over or something, right?
yeah, it's gonna
And so
collapse.
the idea is that maybe there is a lot of cultural pressure and desire that the buildings should be maintained so that that doesn't happen. And so the organizations built up around keeping that, like maintaining the buildings and keeping them up. And like the idea that it's very important that we stop the buildings from falling because the buildings themselves are important. And so there's organization related to that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think to sit down in circle based on what we're talking about, I think edifices and organizations
Mm-hmm.
would be the two to pick based on what we've been talking about.
Right. So you might
Yeah.
have someone be in charge, but it's not necessarily like the billionaire who doesn't have to do anything. It would be more like
Right.
the mayor of the building or something like that.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Okay.
yeah,
Cool.
Like so they might be in charge. They might have privilege relative to the others, but it's not just like the elites up at the top and then everybody else in the slums, right?
yeah.
It's more a matter of somewhat like stuff has to get done and someone has to be in charge in order to
You
get
know,
it done.
you're the person up top. They have the privilege of being up high, of being
Mm-hmm.
away from the water, but they also have to direct the people who go
Mm-hmm.
to other buildings and scavenge materials and reinforce the
Mm-hmm.
crumbling section down below
Yeah.
the water.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so I like that. So the next question would be, what is considered profane? And again, I want to highlight that part of what we're going to be asking ourselves later about our team is to what extent are we opposed to something our community considers sacred, and to what extent do we represent something the community considers profane?
Hmm.
And so we'll think more about that. But so keep that kind of in the back of your mind as we answer some of these questions. So, but what is considered profane and the things that it offers? Bodies, love, emotion, gender, nature, community, friendship, tenderness.
I can see emotion being one of them in the fact that too much of it gets in the way of making sure that things need to get done from like
Mm-hmm.
a broad community perspective. Um,
I you know
these are very hard to choose from.
Yeah, yeah. I
so
was
my
thinking of
thought like
just going all in
Mm-hmm.
and just saying love.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think key to answering this question is reminder that like we're not talking about necessarily everyone in the whole world thinks this stuff is bad as much as what we're saying what are the problems of this world,
Yeah.
and how are
profane
they represented here?
and profane
my,
isn't synonymous with evil.
Right. It's
Profane is
you know
just like, okay, it's, very often something that's profane is, yeah, it's a fact of life, you have to deal with it, it's everywhere, but we're not going to exalt it.
it's like it's distasteful.
my
You
thought
don't
is,
talk about it. You don't do stuff with it.
And you keep it private,
Mhm.
you know, so
my thought is like kind of body, but that in kind of this thought is like, you know, there's an expectation of self-sacrifice and maintenance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I was thinking maybe is, especially with the idea that we are so focused on maintaining the buildings, that nature, the natural processes that are trying to
Yeah.
tear down the buildings and return them to a state of nature, become profane in that way.
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
So
I
the
like that.
idea
I like
that, a seedling is splitting the concrete by growing up through the sidewalk, that's bad.
Yeah.
It might make your house fall over.
Yeah.
And if not now, in 10 years, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so nature seems like, nature being
Yeah.
considered profane seems like it would be an important, like
And
it would
and
fit
we
with
can
what
kind
we've
of,
said already.
and then because these things always kind of bleed out, they always
Yeah.
kind of, things that are repressed get expressed in other places. We could add bodies to that.
Yeah.
And people are like, always, always covered up. And,
Yeah. Like the thing you aspire to would be to be as rigid and unchanging as the buildings themselves. Even
Yeah,
though
yeah.
like part of that whole thing is that they're really not, like they have to be continually maintained.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why
Like
don't
that.
can we agreed on that then?
Yeah.
That nature and
Nature
bodies.
and
are-
bodies.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Okay. So the last of the questions on this page is our magical origin. And so basically like, why are we our magical selves? How do we transcend what's going on there? And so the suggestions, it says reincarnations of interstellar royalty, a magical world hidden within the mundane, a crossing of timelines, embodiments of the stars, defectors from the adversary, or a heroic refutation of the abyss.
I like embodiments of the stars. That's cool.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I like that too. How can we tie that in thematically with the setting
Well,
that we've got? I mean,
my
I'm not
thought
saying
is
we
like-
can't. I'm asking how. Yeah.
The first one, or one of the first ones, was like just the magic of the world. Is that
Magical world hidden within the mundane.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, the abyss is is a inverse reflection of us, and like kind of
Well,
And-
what I initially thought of was that the abyss represents the sea, or the sea represents the abyss, and the stars are external to that. The
Well,
stars
so do we
are-
want to revisit our answers about the abyss given the setting we've just created about the mundane? Do we want
I
to?
think so.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, Abyss was an eternity of pain, an endless hungering, the poisoned heart of a world, a grand cosmic order, cruel and ancient deity, a twisted reflection of our reality.
I feel like if it was kind of represented by the ocean in a way, could maybe be like an endless hungering, like this constant pressure trying to tear down what we've built, but also like the poisoned heart of the world, because it could be that like we tend to think of nature as a good thing, but like what if like there is an element where like all the destruction happened because like if we imagine some representation of nature like Gaia or something like that finally decided, nope, people are too much, I'm taking you all out.
something there is that doesn't love a wall.
Hmm.
Robert Frost, Mending Wall. It sends frozen ground swell under it and spills the upper boulders in the sun,
Yeah.
and makes gaps even two can pass abreast.
You know-
There is the sea hates the wall.
So it could be something like, especially because part of this series playset, if we scroll back up, is the idea that in which it has an optimistic outlook in which monsters have hearts, often fragile or broken hearts in need of healing.
These, I was sitting here thinking, it could be, instead of the poisoned heart of a world, it could literally be that the core of the world is the heart of this deity that flooded things.
Mhm.
And because of how the planet was treated, it's been poisoned, it's corrupted, and thus the ultimate way to would be to heal that.
Mhm.
So like basically,
Well, or the like to
broken hearted.
find a way to coexist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So so yeah, I think the poisoned heart of a world is a better choice now based
Mhm.
on what we've built.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. And so, what is its agenda? To see
Hope
its
you were writing in pencil there, Jason.
yeah. So, what is its agenda? What we just described sounds like it would be to exact retribution.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh, and to be fair, it could be also to propagate too, because
Yeah.
if it gets rid of us, then it could easily just let things naturally progress back to the way they were, and we wouldn't be messing things up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think then we need to look at the harbingers too.
Yeah. No, for sure, for sure. So, like, who are its harbingers? Once again, what it suggests: disgraced royalty, interstellar invaders, travelers from a cursed future, a court of petty gods, saints and their attendant priests, the forces of imperialist general. So, I think we don't necessarily need like the literal heart of the world to necessarily be like a person, right? But we need there to be people. The harbingers are those who enforce the adversary's agenda, right?
I think the Court of Petty Gods actually works here
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just because they don't necessarily have to work together. They can almost be adversaries of
Yeah.
each other.
Well, that's definitely a very Sailor Moon thing, right? Where, because you have the queen who keeps, like dispatching, like, okay, it's your job to go do this thing. And believe me, if you fail, there's someone else waiting to take your spot.
Yeah.
Oh God, this is the second time I've referenced the show this episode, but it's like the intro to Hercules, where he's like, in a world where the gods are petty and cruel. Like, it just
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, nice. That all I kind of like that because it really does create some fun tension between what the abyss represents and what they want versus what the mundane world represents and what they want, because we could imagine problems created in our community as a result of valuing edifices more than people, right? And the idea that like all nature is treated as profane, like we might oppose that to some extent, except that also other forces of nature literally want to destroy us all.
Yeah.
And we're kind of fighting them at the same time that we're kind of saying, but they have a point though. And I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So, back to our magical origin, then are we saying embodiments of the stars?
I still like that.
Yeah. Well, and so that gives us a lot of different ways to go with that. Like the thing that leaps to mind for me is constellations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And the idea that these petty gods are maybe they're the most powerful here, but there are other powers elsewhere that seek to prevent those types of gods from always just getting their way. But they are remote and mysterious by comparison, and that's why they work through us and agents like us instead of acting directly. What do you think?
I think it's I think that's right on the mark.
Oh yeah,
Nice.
And the constellations give it, like, because again, if they're petty gods, then there's like each constellation could be a different one or a different.
Well, so
aspect.
this is why we do this part before we make the characters, right? Because it lets us theme our characters accordingly.
Yeah.
All right. So, what role do you play? And each protagonist is going to choose one or two. I think we might come back to that when we start making our specific characters. But just for now, the list includes royal heir, loyal knight, hopeful suitor, secret lover, demanding mentor, forgotten child, lowly servant, enemy turned friend, fledgling mystic. And what's important there is not that you necessarily are literally a knight loyal to some liege, but rather what kinds of stories do you want to tell with your character, right? And so it suggests you choose one, and then each person will select a playbook that reflects the roles you choose. So, but let's come back to that. But then we've also got what is our shared obligation, and for example, it suggests high school, day job, temple, royal court, summer camp, family expectations. What do we think? I mean, the setting that we have created, if we wanted to do something like high school, we would probably need to figure out what that means in our setting. Is our setting enough like our Earth that it has recognizable high schools?
I want to do something more fantastical than that.
I think family expectations would probably work the best, just because of the way we've kind of set up the community in different.
Does that mean we're all in the same family?
Well, like
that's what
I imagine we all have family expectations.
Well, but this is a shared obligation.
I love the idea that we're all in the same family. I have not played a game like that for 15 years since I last played Amber.
Yeah. Well, it could be, it doesn't have to be literally like one nuclear family, right? It can be like a
brothers,
clan.
Sisters, cousins, uncles, that's kind of thing.
What if there are clans based on each building?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
And maybe maybe there's like you talked about, school in this world's context. Maybe what they teach are general skills needed to help maintain how they live.
Well, I mean, there's every skill that's needed in the community has a way to transmit it to the people who need it. That's kind of a
right.
tautology.
So, but I kind of like the idea of like if each building is kind of its own clan, and there are like people do go back and forth between, and there are like people who might marry someone from another building, but you still have to decide where you live, right? And we get a little bit of like a feudal thing going on there, right? Where each building has to deal with the other buildings because they all have a lot of shared needs and abilities, but each building is kind of most loyal to itself, right? Like you don't want the other buildings to fall down, but you especially don't want your own building to fall down.
Right.
And if your own building needs to do something that hurts another building in order to protect itself, maybe that's something that needs to be talked about, and you would talk about that among your clan. And so there's like, I think that we've kind of described a community that is not at war, but it could certainly be at squabble.
At odds.
Right?
I like that, at squabble.
And the buildings that are nearest you are the ones that could fall onto yours.
Right,
so
yeah.
You have a closer the closer the building is to you, the closer your ties to it.
Yeah.
In more than ways than just zip lines, right? You have an interest in their well-being when they're nearby, but the one across town,
could have
is much less interested.
have a thought like there's kind of a shared watch between two neighboring buildings where like they somebody is at the building, looking at the building across, looking for defects, because if something starts crumbling on the side facing another building, that's a sign that it could fall towards that building.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just okay.
So like that's one of the minor roles that could be in the.
Right. So there's a level of you care most about your own building, but there's an extent to which the buildings can affect one another, and so there could also be, for example, like we hate that other building because we keep telling them that their edifice is crumbling, on the side that's facing us, and we tell them and they're not fixing it. Why don't they care enough to fix this thing? You know, like it could be, you could have stuff like that, you know, like they're not managing their building right. But yeah, so I like that. And so the quote unquote family expectations would mean that perhaps there is a broad extended family that includes like second cousins and great uncles and stuff like that. That, but we don't necessarily need, like, we're not literally all brothers and sisters or something like that. We could be, but we don't have to be. But the basic idea is that we all live in the same building in this community.
Okay.
Is it all right? So next would be our hideout, and
Well, we didn't do the role we played.
so I was kind of skipping that, and we would come back to
Okay,
it. But
all
but
right.
but if we want to do it now, that works too. I mean, I would. That's kind of just what I was thinking. If we want to do it now, then that's cool.
Well, I was just looking through that with basically what we've been talking about and
Yeah.
had an idea. So
I was thinking we kind of decide the group things first, and
okay,
then make
okay,
the
we'll go
characters
on.
from within that.
I'll hold on to it then.
Okay.
Go
All
on.
right. So our hideout is an ancient temple, a majestic castle, a star chamber, an overlooked place, a place between worlds. And so I think in like specifically this is not just where do we live. This is the place where we go, where we talk about our magical girl stuff. Where we
think
get our
the star-
missions and do our investigations.
I think a star chamber's a little on the nose.
That being said, you know, it's a metaphorical thing. What if, for some reason, there's a place under the water that's dry?
I
I'm
was
not sure exactly
thinking-
why, but we discovered it like as a group. It's at, like in the basement of our building. There's a dry spot.
An ancient, not observatory because it's down. What's the thing where like, what's it called when they project stars on
Planetarium.
planetarium? Yeah.
That could be fun. Like if the building has a planetarium that's been decommissioned because nobody cares about it anymore.
Yeah, and it's down, and it is surprisingly stable for.
That is kind of fun because like what I was thinking maybe like I'm not proposing this instead of that, but what I had in what I was thinking about was the idea that somehow tying into this idea that we're getting our powers from the stars is that when everybody else goes up to the roof, there's the roof and there's nowhere higher to go, but that somehow we, when we're going up the stairs to the roof, can go up another flight that no one else can go.
Oh yeah, I like that.
I like that.
I like that.
Okay.
I like that.
Yeah.
Ooh. Like,
It could.
when
it
you go out this
present as
doorway
a
here,
planetarium. Or
and you hit the roof of the building, but for us, there's
Yeah.
another flight of stairs.
Yeah, and it has to be some little thing where like it is our power that allows us to make the other stairs appear, and we have to be careful so nobody sees.
Yeah, yeah. So, and rather than planetarium, observatory. It's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a place that's connected to the sky.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And like having it be observatory themed, or it could even be both, right? Like it could have the dome that has the big telescope that we use to do our spying and stuff, but it can also project the stars on the interior.
Yeah.
Like it could be all of those things. That's cool. So so I love all that. And so then further we ask is like, how did we find it? What ritual grants us access to it? Because that's a good point of how did we find it? It kind of all ties in because we haven't really talked about like how did we get picked? Like how did we end up being these?
I think
chosen.
I think that you know the stereotypical, you know, kids playing a game, chasing each other through abandoned areas of the building,
Mm-hmm.
hide and seek slash exploring, you know, just because one of the things that occurs to me is that If you don't have elevators, if you don't have mechanical means of going between floors, the highest floors of a building are really inaccessible.
Well,
So
it's interesting just because if anyone isn't already aware, the TV show Silo is on Apple TV Plus, and it's great. But one of the things about that setting is exactly what you were just talking about, which is that part of their whole pact of laws, which is kind of a big mystery of why it was set up this way, is that this thing is like it's got 144 floors, and to be clear, each floor is like 3 or 4 stories tall. And so it's just stairs, which
yeah,
means to go down from a high floor maybe takes a while, but it's comparatively much easier than going back up. And by that token, what you end up with is the the people on the upper floors are kind of the ones in charge, and it's a whole thing where like you don't want to go down because then you have to
have
come
to
back
climb
up.
back up. Yeah.
Whereas the people at the bottom, if they want to do anything, they have to go up. So it's that, and there's kind of an inherent sort of structural privilege
Well,
there.
My
I
point
imagine-
was that the point I was getting at was that the highest levels of these buildings are where you find the abandoned stuff.
Oh
Is,
yeah.
is because people, if you don't need that space, you don't start climbing up that far because
Well,
the commerce between buildings is be mostly in the water. It's mostly boats and
So-
bridges and things like that.
I want to offer something tied into that, because what I was thinking too is that the only place you would have for any kind of agriculture, unless you have like a lot of like grow lights and stuff, which you could have hydroponics on any floor. And maybe that's even kind of like the preferred way to do it, because nature is kind of considered profane. So you want to have it like more controlled, is seen as like better.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
rooftop gardens
Mm-hmm.
probably are. I like what we were talking about, like what profane means. I like it like if they're kind of a frowned upon necessity, right?
Yeah.
Like
And
people like hydroponics better, but you can't quite get everything you need that way.
Well, hydroponics is for your basic foodstuffs,
Mhm.
right? What people make and what people grow in the rooftop gardens
Mhm.
are tobacco and flowers
Mhm.
and things that are
Luxuries.
things that are about the body.
Yeah. Well, and so maybe you even have the sort of thing where there are people who think the people who go up to the roof and do those things are distasteful.
Yeah,
Right?
they're they're profane.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I was thinking about in terms of like how we got picked, what all that happened. I mean, like one of the sort of classic ways is the idea that somehow we were all together and there was some kind of a danger or a challenge where we worked together in a way that represented and idealized what the powers that be are looking for. And so we were chosen because we worked as a team and served those interests.
I
Now,
like that.
I can see that.
yeah, so we don't, so like maybe just something was happening and we all happened to be up on the rooftop garden because that's where they can see, right? Like that sort of
I
idea.
mean, that that can fit, except there's like I was looking through one of the playbooks, and one of them is the Enigma, where it starts out with nobody knowing the.
Well, so we can certainly talk about that. I think what we're talking about broadly. So one of the things that I think we can tie into all of this, like, because we can always retcon that one of the party wasn't in that initial group and they came somehow differently, right? Like you're right, but I think what we're talking about is the group broadly. But and again, it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, I'm just suggesting that is one way that it often happens in these kinds of stories. Yeah. right? I mean, for that matter, it doesn't actually necessarily have to have happened to all of us at once. For example, with Sailor Moon, it kind of happens just to her, and then it keeps feeling like other people keep getting it also. And, and there's a whole different thing. And there's some people that she interacts with who have their powers is an entirely different thing, right? So we don't necessarily all need to have the same origin. That's true. I was just kind of, that was one idea.
Well, I mean, like I mean, like I do like the idea of maybe that your idea for some of us, for some, and maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
for another could be you know exploring or playing in. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I this looks like a good place to hide. Climb the stairs and oh, this is a cool place, and
Okay.
nobody can find you.
Yeah. I mean,
Like
yeah. Okay. I mean, what? I
like
mean,
hide and seek kind of thing.
sure, but
Right.
I
Well,
get.
it's
Well, but what we still need to explain for each of us as part of all of this is why do you have magic powers though? Right? Unless you're the unlikely hero, because the unlikely hero kind of specifically doesn't have powers. That's their whole thing.
Hmm.
um
Okay.
So,
uh
which I'm not saying we couldn't do that. I'm just saying that like what I was offering was a shared reason that we would all have powers granted to us by the stars. So if someone didn't wasn't part of that, we need some other way to explain why they are able to transcend.
Hmm.
okay. So the rooftop garden of our building
Mm-hmm.
is slash was tended by um Uncle Alcor. Uncle Alcor was a funny sort. Didn't get along well with the rest of the family, but somebody needed to tend that garden, and so he went off to do that. And you have to climb up a bunch of floors to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And he made the things that needed to be made there and brought them down, and had a function in the building, but was also kind of looked down for it. Didn't have too many friends among the establishment of the building. But he's funny, and we liked him. And one day we climbed the stairs to follow him up the stairs. We weren't supposed to, but we did anyways. And instead of finding this rooftop garden, or at the heart of this rooftop garden, we find a telescope, and not just some little spyglass. We're talking about a big 20-inch reflector.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and uh, he's the last initiate of this tradition, this ancient tradition of the stars. And he's all like, "Oh, you kids shouldn't be around here. You're going to get in trouble." But we're not, we're not listening.
Yeah.
And one of us looks through the telescope while he's trying to chase off somebody else, and we see something out there, um and it's nothing we've been told exists.
Well, it could be
And
what the sort of the first threat of one of the harbingers, right?
right. And the way we it's that maybe not a telescope, but the kind of an ancient observatory, like a henge, or an arrangement of stones, etc. And things get moved around
Hmm.
such a way that it opens a way for a harbinger to arrive. and we cooperate to expunge it.
Oh, okay.
And
I want to jump off from that.
okay,
I like the idea that we are not the first time this has happened. We are only the latest.
yeah,
But we don't know that. And what it is that the top of this building in the rooftop garden has this sort of like Stonehenge type of deal, but like we so far as we know, nobody knows like what it is. It's just the way this garden is designed, right? It's just the furniture essentially. But it is actually the place where in the past when these avatars of the stars have been needed before, the henge appears. And so it could be something that the harbingers are seeking to eliminate, because once they know, wait, the new henge has appeared. So maybe it could even just be a something, well, or like maybe it wasn't always there, or it do we like it if it was always there, or if it appears?
I think I like it if it appears.
And just like nobody else cares enough, and we're the people who are like, what is this, what is this place,
Yeah.
and then it gets attacked. So one of the things that I think is interesting about this is that it suggests when you start your campaign, the assumption should be that this is season 2 of your show. You don't need to
Yeah.
do the part where everyone meets each other and how you first learn about your powers. We can know what it is, but that's not the part that you're telling when you play. But I kind of like the idea that maybe we found this strange henge that had appeared, and it's like, what is going on here? And maybe we have Uncle Elcor or whoever that kind of knows what it is, and is kind of like encourages us to go check it out, knowing perhaps what's about to happen. And so maybe tied into
Maybe Uncle Alcor is the last survivor of the previous group.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was my thought.
Yeah.
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 And so like he knows that the abyss is about to start moving again. And in order to combat it, the stars will need to intervene once more. And
Yeah, I like that.
yeah.
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 I
Okay.
like that a lot.
Cool. So basically, how where this place is, sounds like we access it kind of through the henge, right? What ritual grants us access to it? Do we have some like gemstone or some magic device, or do we have to say secret words or do a gesture or something? Like how do we get in?
We stand in particular places around the
To represent
perimeter.
our place in the zodiac, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 I thought because one of our profane things is a body, what about if our magical thing is actually a tattoo?
Hmm.
So
Ooh.
you get your constellation or what have you
It's
tattooed on
marked
your
on your
body.
body. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that's shown up in occasion. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a gem
Nice.
in the Steven universe, or
Mhm. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I like all that. So I think there's more questions to follow, but that does start getting more into the things that would be different between different individuals. And so
Yeah.
perhaps now is the time for us to revisit that role question and then start looking at the playbooks. So let's follow the book's encouragement though, and suggest that the order is which role do you play is first, and then you choose a playbook that fits that.
or at least is compatible.
Compatible, yeah. Reflects the roles that you have chosen. So you can
I-
choose one or two, just to reread them: Royal Heir, Loyal Knight, Hopeful Suitor, Secret Lover, Demanding Mentor, Forgotten Child, Lowly Servant, Enemy Turned Friend, Fledgling Mystic. And remember, none of those have to be literal.
I am picking a hopeful suitor, and this is someone who has been sent from the building next door
Hmm.
to marry in here. But I haven't been told anyone in particular.
You're supposed to find
Just
someone.
just find someone over there because we need to have more family connections across the buildings.
Mm-hmm.
So we're sending you to live over there, and you're going to find a spouse among the
Mm-hmm.
people who live over there, and it'll work out. Trust me, this is how it works.
Yeah. Okay. Um,
So I'm not actually like a member of the family.
mm-hmm.
I'm not closely related, but I'm
Yeah.
been told that I need to.
So probably the best way to think about these roles too is like Nobilis just did. Think about what is it that you're doing in the mundane world, because what you're going to be doing when transcended is fighting stuff mostly, right? But the way that you do that should reflect who you are inside. And for that matter, it should also be an expression of the things that you have to keep secret in your normal life should be expressed in your transcended form.
So my thought was for my character, I kind of have something brewing in my mind that
Mm-hmm.
is forgotten child.
Okay.
You know, kind of middle child of the particular. I keep wanting to say like what we would call families would be like lines. You know,
Sure. Yeah.
you know, one clan, many lines.
Well, and I think that we've established that there's intermarriages and stuff between buildings, right? So
Yeah,
not everybody in the building is necessarily a blood relation.
yeah. But like anyway, middle child of the current generation of the family, and just you know, you know, I I help out where I can, and just not uh just doing things kind of, but mostly unnoticed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
If nobody else has their eye on it, I was kind of thinking about fledgling mystic. Maybe the only character of the others that, without knowing the specifics about what's all supposed to happen, maybe they were the one that studied the stars, like that they already thought about the stars and wondered if there was some sort of a mystical thing going on, and they're the one that's like really into that part of it. And it, like wanting to know more about the stars and why they do what they do, and the prophetic things related to that. And so, like someone who was seen as kind of a dreamer, um, always wanting to go and look at the stars instead of doing whatever else that they're actually supposed to be doing. And so it's a matter of like, it's distasteful enough that you're always going up to the roof, but you're not even looking at the planets. You're looking further up. How are the stars supposed to help anybody? Like, and so there would be that element of it, but just always felt drawn to them in some indefinable way.
Thinking enemy turned friend.
Yeah.
But from the sense of like he was from another building, and in the past there was maybe some tension and skirmishes, and ultimately there was bad blood, but whether it was maybe a friend or a partner, or maybe he didn't like what they did in that building and ended up leaving.
Yeah. One note too, just for everybody to consider, is that it is entirely in keeping with the genre to have someone actually join the group from the supernatural side and then have to pose as a regular person. That is entirely allowed. So they don't have to have been a mundane person that then became transcendent in this way. They can come the other way, where they're actually inherently magical, but they occasionally have to turn it down to pose as non-magical. Like, I think there's a playbook that's actually designed for if that's what's happening.
Yeah, the
Oh,
outsider.
nice.
Yeah. So just so everyone is aware that that's also an option.
Yeah.
I was actually looking at the playbooks first, and
Mm-hmm.
then looking at this, but thinking about it, that actually sounds like fun.
Yeah.
How about Royal Air?
Okay. Sure.
One of the petty gods, half mundane, half deity children.
So do you think that have they been stripped of their deity power as a punishment?
Yeah, and so that they were, well, if they were stripped of their deity power, or okay, check me on this. Maybe Uncle Alcor had a clandestine relationship with the enemy at one point in time, and it's not actually Uncle Alcor for my character, it's actually Daddy. But
I-
That's a little bit of an Aquaman situation there.
Yeah, but they have to pretend like it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah. Well, so there
in
could
order
be
to
a
be
whole
accepted.
tragic backstory there.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't even have to be a tragic one necessarily. But yeah, so it could be too that you don't even necessarily like it could be, for example, that you weren't stripped of your power. You just never necessarily specifically had it. You just lived in that place until for some reason you came here.
My thought is like, since this is supposed to, technically, like the idea is to start season 2.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these character could have joined because of the events at the end of season 1.
Oh, I was the former villain of season 1.
Yeah.
Or a lieutenant as a villain.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, you could be like the Zuko, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you were initially the first sort of the first harbinger of all of this, but we persuaded you that we were worth fighting for.
The
But
power of friendship rules.
there's still some
I mean,
friction.
that's very appropriate for the game, it seems like.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, it's like literally, it's like I think there's a whole playbook designed around it. But yeah, so okay, that's fun. So let's now talk about like what we think the playbook would
Or Peridot.
be for each. Yeah, Peridot is kind of that's kind of what the sort of one model of that sort of idea.
Yeah.
So so looking back at the playbooks, it's also important once again to remember that these don't lots of these things can be thematic rather than literal, some of the descriptions of them. But we've got the Enigma, a mysterious ally and dramatic hero. And one of the things that's interesting about the Enigma is that unlike everyone else, no one knows who you really are between the two identities.
Yeah.
Then there's the Guardian, a vigilant protector and patient healer. The Harmony, two voices speaking as one, a beacon of hope. The Outsider, a renegade with a troubled past and something to prove. The Stranger, a cold and distant luminary. The Time Traveler, a secretive oracle and dedicated friend. And the Unlikely Hero, an unproven prospect and heartfelt companion. And another notable thing about that one is that they do not have a transcended form. Their playbook is built around not having that. They are the friend who is not a magical girl but helps out.
People
Yeah, so hopeful, honest, and unproven, the Unlikely Hero does their best to keep up with their companions. They carry great potential within them, but will that potential be realized? And so you have a whole thing there where you don't actually transcend in the way the others do. Which, I mean, but like, obviously the playbook is designed for you to still be helpful and effective, just in
Do it a
different
different
ways.
way. It's
Yeah.
different ways. Yeah. I initially had been like, why do I want to play someone who doesn't have magic in a setting with magic? But I just realized that my background as being from another building is perfect for Unlikely Hero. So I think I'm going to claim, unless someone else has their heart set on it, I'm going to claim that one.
Nice.
My thought is Enigma.
Okay.
Yeah. It kind of fits like, the forgotten child becomes the Enigma.
Sure. And that kind of ties in a little bit to what you were saying earlier in the idea that like you kind of ended up joining in a different way than the rest of us also.
Well, my thought, and in that case, like, everybody's following Uncle Alcor up, and my character just kind of saw that happen. It's like, oh.
Yeah. So our and obviously I don't think we're necessarily planning this as a real campaign that we're definitely moving, but one of the things certainly about the Enigma is that their whole thing is that they're flashy. When you play an Enigma, you earn XP when you address a challenge with mystery or ostentatious action. Dazzle your foes and allies alike with your skill and beauty, but never let them get too close.
I mean, the archetype of that has got to be Tuxedo Mask.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And my work here is done.
Like
You
I
didn't
said,
do anything.
Well, like I said, I don't know details enough, so.
Well, no, that's okay. So the idea though is that they are very flashy and mysterious is how they're designed to be. And aloof, secretive, and graceful. Always there at the moment of need, only to disappear mysteriously when the danger has passed.
Racer X is another example of that.
Yeah. So if you are looking to play someone who is a little bit more like mysterious, but in kind of an aloof way, then the Stranger might be something. But I mean, if you wanted the Enigma, I'm not telling you not. I'm just.
I have something that would work very well for Enigma.
Okay. So
it's more just the idea of Tuxedo Mask. I just didn't understand how that connected.
Okay. With my character, the hopeful mystic, I think the time traveler is the one that kind of makes sense. And they have not like literally physically traveled through time, but they get like visions is what I was kind of thinking. So I think we'll talk more about each of these in a moment, but we can have everyone kind of claim them.
Oh, I'm gonna go with the Stranger because I have an interesting little idea.
Okay. And were you going to be the outsider, Lee? I mean, you don't have to be. That's just kind of the one the playbook we were talking about.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, but has an antagonistic relationship with their. I was reading, reckless, jaded, and combative. The outsider has an antagonistic relationship with their allies, and I don't think that really fits. The story that we were doing.
No. So what I'll offer is that having read more of this, and we can kind of discuss it. It's less antagonistic, as in you still oppose us, and more like there's still some rivalry and resentment. Like you have been persuaded that you are no longer on this side of the abyss, but you perhaps still think you can do this better than we can. That would be like, so you have a rival, you do competitive things with this playbook. Another way to go perhaps would be the harmony, which is this two voices speaking as one, which you could kind of reflect by your dual nature. The human part of you and the deity part of you. Yeah.
I was actually leaning more towards that.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's great. Okay. Cool. So I think we each picked one, right?
Yeah.
All right, so let's kind of walk through the playbooks for each of the ones that we picked, just to talk a little bit more about them. So for the Enigma, aloof, secretive, and graceful, the Enigma leads a complex double life, always there at the moment of need, only to disappear mysteriously when the danger has passed. Like any good act, The enigma leaves their audience wanting more. What are you hiding behind the mask? Will you ever let someone in on your secret? And it suggests that for your name, your mundane name should be a forgettable name or a puzzling name. Your true name should be a dashing name or an imperious name. You're going to make a promise to, 2 promises, one to each of, 2 other players. You're going to need to make a secretive promise and an intimate promise. The Enigma's specific thing, when they go into eclipse, the aspect of the eclipse is that who you really are clearly isn't enough. Only the mask is worthy of their love. You reject all aspects of your everyday self and embrace only the most superficial aspects of your persona. Give them what they want, effortless beauty and extravagant drama. And then you escape eclipse when someone shows you the truth of their own heart and you reveal your identity to them. They add a promise about keeping your secret. And so one of you start with a point in express and one in conceal. And then the ability that you have by default is behind the mask, which says your transcendent and mundane selves lead separate lives and no one knows that they are the same person. Your transcendent self wears a mask. Describe it. And so key, and it has a little bit of language here, is that the players kind of have to be willing to play along there. Because as players, we will know. But it's important that our characters do not, they may know your mundane personality, almost certainly they would, and they may know your transcendent identity, but they do not know that they are the same person unless they learn it through the game. And so it specifically says, how does your character fit into the group as their mundane self? How does the group feel about your masked persona? What does wearing the mask let you do that you would never do otherwise? Make sure to talk to the other players about how you imagine this working in the story, since everyone will have to work together to make sure your secret identity plays out smoothly. And I mean, it very much could be the sort of thing, depending on how you role play your mundane personality, but it could be the sort of thing like, oh no, there's danger. We have to get blank out of here so that they won't get hurt. And then or something like that, or you pretend to run away when what you're really doing is transcending, or something like that, right?
It's our proverbial phone booth.
Right. Yeah. And then so the other powers that you can kind of choose from, working from the shadows, Phantom, which lets you resist any consequence that would cause you to be detected or overlooked, or alternately, to immediately seize the attention of everyone present, which I think that's funny. You can have Shrouded in Secrets. No one can unmask you without your permission. Cover story. You take 1 less die to your obligation roll to fill up segments of your recovery clock, which basically is like if you get hurt in your transcended persona and it wouldn't make sense why your mundane persona would, you basically just get some bonuses dealing with that. 2 steps ahead, 2 times permission. You can assist a teammate without spending stress because you prepared for that situation. But then when you're transcendent, the moment you transcend, you can choose to immediately disappear and may reappear at any time in the place of your choosing. Which is, that's fun. I think, I want to trying to remember how the, you choose special and transcendent abilities. So the list of special abilities and a list of transcendent abilities that are only available when you're transcended. You start with 1 special ability and choose another, and then you choose 1 of the transcendent abilities. And then, of course, as you advance, you can choose others. But that's how it is to start.
So always have behind the mask.
Yeah.
And then I can choose working from the shadows, Phantom, Shrouded in Secrets, cover story, 2 steps ahead.
Right. But then also the things listed under Transcendent, which is the big reveal, watch this, and powerful friends, you choose 1 of those as well. And so there was the one that I just mentioned. Then watch this is when you push yourself, choose one of the following additional benefits. You perform a superhuman feat of athletics or deliver a monologue without anyone interrupting you. Or powerful friends. Once permission, you flash back to a special downtime action taken as your transcendent self and get a bonus to how that can go. So it's basically a special kind of flashback move.
Yeah.
Do you have any of those powers that you're sort of inherently leaning towards?
Well, I think the transcendent ability I would choose would be the big reveal.
Mm-hmm.
Because that fits very well. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, go, we'll handle this.
Yeah. So
Okay. Run away, run around the corner, transcend, disappear, and then.
Yeah. So, kind of like what we were talking about, the example of Tuxedo Mask in Sailor Moon. Like, if you watch any of it, it's pretty clear as soon as he shows up for the first time in that season that, like, it's absolutely the sort of thing. Like we were just talking about how we all have to sort of work together to make the secret identity thing happen. Because in that show, it is super obvious to the watcher who Tuxedo Mask is. And yet the characters cannot figure it out. And it is constantly happening that, like, oh no, we got to get this ordinary guy out of here so he doesn't get hurt. Hey, Tuxedo Mask, where did you come from? It's
and nobody asked where the ordinary guy went.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
yeah. So in any case, that seems to be sort of
Would
the
it-
archetype for this.
So if like the by physical appearance.
Well, so the idea is in your transcendent mode, you have a mask.
Well, like my thoughts, like part of the mask would be more than just like the face being obscured.
Well, I
It
imagine
changes.
we all have special outfits.
Yeah.
I mean, we all look different.
Okay.
But the key is the mask is not, again, it doesn't have to necessarily be literal, but the idea is like in Sailor Moon or any of these shows, like when Usagi transforms into Sailor Moon, we can tell it's the same person. She's in a different outfit, right?
Right.
Versus the idea that someone would not be able to tell that it's you. Even us who also know about these magical powers and stuff.
Yeah, they play up the Clark Kent and Superman,
Yeah.
with the sunglasses thing to the hilt, like, because they don't even wear masks. Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the idea is just everybody magically looks different when you transcend, but there should be, as part of yours, an idea that your identity is specifically being obscured.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So did you decide which of the other special abilities you would be choosing?
I think I would do cover story.
Okay. All right. So that one is you choose to take -1d to your obligation roll to fill any remaining segments of your recovery clock, which basically means in the obligation phase, when you're dealing with the stresses of the mundane life for your mundane self, you're going to volunteer to have that be more stressful, but in exchange, you sort of automatically get some healing of your injuries.
Okay.
That's basically how that works.
Yeah. And I imagine, and if for whatever reason I don't actually need to do healing, can just
Yeah, it says you may choose. You don't have to do that. You can choose to do that. So if you didn't need any recovery, you
Then you don't
would
have to.
presumably not choose to do that. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, cool. So I don't think no one picked the Guardian. The Harmony. So Lee was going to be the Harmony. So confident, earnest, and attentive, the Harmony is an inspiration to their allies. They understand the power of relationships better than anyone because it is their power. The Harmony can be a booming presence leading the way or lift other voices that have gone unheard. When you play a Harmony, you earn XP when you address a challenge with understanding or coordination. Your voice can keep hope alive, and you are never truly alone. Which parts of yourself do you share with others, and which are yours alone? How will you light the way? For your mundane name, you choose a lofty name or a romantic name, and your true name should be a musical name or a beautiful name. Obviously, these are just suggestions, too. You don't have the first. You're going to make a shared promise and 2 conflicting promises to someone else. That's fun. When you eclipse, you are fractured. A sour note has shattered your harmony. Incidentally, for people who have watched Steven Universe, Garnet is the prototypical harmony here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. A sour note has shattered your harmony. Now there's uncertainty and conflict. Your relationship, once a source of strength, is suddenly tenuous. You are divided, and a difference of opinions keeps you separated. And you would escape eclipse when someone else mediates your dispute, and your halves are able to reconcile their differences. So
I was reading that, and I was thinking of, the backstory where the character defected.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the original person that, and it comes in a little bit with some more of the abilities, but is that this person was reaching out to me as the villain and trying to, be that source of hope.
Mm-hmm.
And it, it broke through right before I would have killed her.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in order to save her life, we had to become a one solid, person.
I like your concept of the character so much here because it's so fitting with the themes that we've kind of set up with this idea that we simultaneously think that the adversary has kind of a point, except that we want to coexist with them rather than let them win by destroying us. Mm-hmm. But the people who think that we should just destroy the adversary, we also kind of don't agree with. But we're kind of stuck in the middle of 2 sides that we're trying to make peace between, but the 2 sides don't seem to want to make peace with each other. And so by you representing those 2 sides uniting in one person, that's just a neat thematic resonance.
Yeah.
Cool. That's very cool. I like that.
I really like that. So,
Mm-hmm.
the shared promise is easy from that perspective.
Yeah. And then to someone else, you need to make 2 conflicting promises. I just think that's really cool. Anyway, you also are going to start with a point in empathize and 1 in forgive. It's notable, I'm not reading them right now, but each playbook, when you do a gather information roll, you're given different questions. Like these are the questions that you can ask when you do a roll, and they're different for the different playbooks, which I think is interesting. Yeah. Special abilities, you begin with in harmony, which is you are a relationship, 2 people whose love has bound them into a single form and identity. Should you ever be separated, all actions you make are desperate until you are reunited. You roll +1d to gather info about relationships. So we could have that be literal for you, or do you think that you are actually 2 separate identities, or are these just reflecting the 2 different sides of your personality?
I think we're 2 separate identities that have combined into one.
Okay. Yeah. So perhaps when we talked about like the villain of season 1 was one of them, and the other was one of the other characters from season 1, and like the big finale thing was that they combined and they're one person now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of neat. That's a fun way for everyone else to kind of like, that's a little complicated. I feel complicated about that. That's neat.
Complications.
Yeah. That's cool. That's very cool. Okay, so you would choose 1 more between split attention, inseparable, synchronized, bonds of love, and perfect pitch. Have you thought about which one of those you would be? I mean, I can read what they are if we want.
No, I thought Bonds of Love was very interesting because it says you start each downtime with 2 links to yourself.
Yes. So the various things that links can do, most people need to make those with other people, but you can kind of automatically get them with yourself, which is neat.
Yeah. but I think I would probably go with perfect pitch
Okay.
as something that comes over from the other person that I'm
Yeah.
doing it with.
Nice. So your voice is polyphonic and eerily beautiful. Your allies can always hear you speak, regardless of distance or other interference. When you sing to inspire your allies or soothe the troubled hearts of foes, roll +1d. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's cool. And it could be too that like when you were a villain, you were like a musical singing villain, because that's definitely a thing that happens in anime.
Yeah, there was just that sting that comes out of
Mhm.
left field when you take a pose,
Yeah.
and then there's just that heavy guitar sting.
Yeah. Nice. That's very cool. So for transcendent abilities, you would be choosing between powerful presence as one or beacon.
And I think Beacon kind of fits the theme
Yeah.
we're building with this one.
Yeah. So once per transcendence, you may uplift your allies with a speech or song. When you do, it counts as spending a link on each ally that can hear you, and they choose which link effect to use. So basically, you do the thing, and everybody gets to take one link benefit.
Right. Can that link with perfect pitch so
Um,
that all my allies can hear me?
well, so I think that it could, but I think the intent with the beacon special move is that you don't roll; it just happens.
Okay.
Yeah, is you can just do that. Now you do mark your transcendence track, right? Like that you did a thing, you used your ability, but you don't roll because it just like once per transcendence, you just do it. That's my interpretation.
So are all transcendent abilities advance the transcendent track?
Yes.
So like the big reveal ability would do
Yeah.
that.
When you do it, yeah, you mark the transcendence track.
Yeah, because that does make that a interesting decision you would have to make.
Well, yeah, like that's built into the mechanics of the system. Everyone has to kind of decide when to do it because it's a limited use. Like so, you are more powerful and able to do more things when you're transcendent, but it can run out. So if you do it too soon, you could be in trouble. You know, but yeah, so that's definitely part of the whole thing there. Okay, cool. So did nobody picked the outsider in, right? So skipping ahead, then the stranger. That was what you picked, Jason, right?
Yes.
So a cold and distant luminary, deliberate, withdrawn, and perceptive, the stranger can access secrets and knowledge that others cannot. This focus means that they struggle to express their feelings to others, though they often feel them very deeply. To the stranger, the world is a beautifully complex machine to be approached with curiosity and ingenuity. When you play a stranger, you earn XP. When you address a challenge with knowledge or subtlety, you see the world as no one else can, but will they trust the knowledge you offer? What knowledge do you seek? Why do you struggle to relate to others? What truths do you deny about yourself? For your mundane name, you would choose a confusing name or a model name. For your true name, you would choose an alien name or an unnerving name. You make a promise of growth and a misguided promise. When you eclipse, no more wasting time with friends or feelings. They just get in the way. It's time to focus on something real and tangible, something that makes sense. You find a concrete, rational, and entirely impossible task to pursue to the exclusion of all else. And then you escape eclipse when someone works alongside you on your task without judgment, and you let the task go incomplete and unresolved. I think that's neat. I like all of these little eclipse things. So you would start with points in analyze and conceal, and then you would begin with stranger to kindness, which is you cannot make a connection or help a friend recover in downtime. Those moves you cannot do. But when you roll obligation, you always roll stars. And when you investigate, but you get a 1 die bonus to investigate always whenever you do that move. And so always rolling stars is a big advantage, making the stranger less likely to suffer stress during obligations. Why is that so? How does your character cope with society's expectations? Others can still make connections with you, but this means that by default, your friends cannot spend links to help you during difficult situations. Is your character content in their isolation? But then you would also be choosing a second ability from Oblivious, Safe Distance, No Sleep, Things Feel, and Know It All. It's one of those. Leap out at you.
I'm gonna go with Things Feel, and in Transcendences I'm gonna go with, because there's Ex Machina, but there's also gonna be Here's One I Prepared Earlier.
Yeah. So for Things Feel, you can empathize, which is the move, with non-human things as if they were people. If you use this to gather info, you may ask questions from any playbook currently in play, meaning that list of questions that we mentioned from the gather information, you can choose from all of the playbook's lists of questions.
Hey
but
guys, remember we talked about how nature was taboo? And
yeah. So non-human things can mean inanimate objects, animals, robots, plants, or any other thing that you find interesting. Humans or human-like beings are generally not what this ability is for. So mostly, like everyone else, to try to empathize and gather information. That way you can only do that with, people. But but not the outsider. And then here's one I prepared earlier, Transcendent ability. Once per Transcendence, you may activate a flashback without spending stress to create a device that does one of the following. Allow for an escape, reveal unexpected information, or create an opportunity for an ally.
Oh, I have a wonderful idea.
Yeah? Nice. So, the Time Traveler, which is the one I was going to pick, is like ominous, strange, and full of impossible knowledge. The Time Traveler seeks to defy fate. They have seen a possible future, and that gives them a unique perspective that others lack. This can also alienate them from their friends, making it hard for them to trust that good things will happen without their direct intervention. When you play a Time Traveler, you earn XP when you address a challenge with foresight or revelation. You have seen and survived a perilous future. Sharing what you know may be the only way to help your friends find a brighter path. What do you miss about the future? What is most precious about the present? Is knowledge of your past enough to change their future, or will your meddling just cause them to repeat it? And I would choose either an anachronistic name or a clever name for the mundane name. And then true name would be a historic name or an ominous name. I would make a forgotten promise and a paradoxical promise. When I eclipse, you've known all along that changing fate was impossible, yet here you are, so much wasted effort, wasted time. But if this fate is inevitable, why not embrace it? You set aside caution for instinct and pursue a direct course of action, heedless of consequence. You escape eclipse when your fated person defies your predictions and shows you they can alter the course of fate. Change either your fated person, their fate, or both. I would start with a point in Confess and in Analyze. And my starting ability, Fated, is you traveled through time to change another protagonist's fate. What perilous fate are you here to prevent? Whose fate is it? So again, like I was saying, my sort of conception of the character is that she didn't necessarily literally come from another time as much as maybe she had a vision of something, like a prophetic vision that she believes is true. And so I would choose one of the other player characters to say, I know about some perilous fate for them, and I want to stop it from happening. And then I would choose one more between Ominous, Saw It Coming, Oracle, My Very Best Friend, Out of Time, and Rewind, Return. I think that we've got a couple of people who have kind of already chosen some abilities that are kind of parallel to some of these. But I kind of like. Oh, there's lots of good ones, but I kind of like ominous. When you use your impossible knowledge to persuade one, gain +1 effect level. If a fate you warned of comes to pass, mark XP. And so I kind of just like that idea of like when you're trying to persuade someone, like I just suddenly point out like I know something about their future, in an ominous way.
I told you so.
Like, it's like I'm trying to persuade someone because if you don't do what I say, this is going to happen to you. Something like that. That could be fun. There's lots of good ones though too. Yeah, I think I'll leave it with that though, especially since we're kind of not really playing, we're just choosing.
Yeah.
But then, so transcendent abilities, Clock Stopper, On the Other Side of Time, or Lost Cause. So the Lost Cause is really bleak. It's basically the Rick and Morty scenarios. Once per transcendence, when an ally suffers severe consequences, you may choose to abandon this timeline for a better one. Whatever consequences they would have suffered are replaced by your suffering a level 3 harm, Traveler's Despair. Your relationship to the person you save is different in this timeline. They will tell you how.
Wow.
So that's kind of funny, but like also bleak. Like I feel like really doing that in a campaign would feel messed up. But I think what I would be choosing is Clock Stopper, which is if there's ever a question of who acts first, it's you. Once permission, when the director advances a clock, you may say no, and the clock does not advance.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is
No.
just straight awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Lost Cause one is kind of awesome too.
I mean, it's awesome in its way.
Yeah.
It's just it's literally kind of like, oh no, my friend is hurt. Well, I can go to another universe where that didn't happen. So, bye.
Well,
Well, I mean,
or with it being a vision, kind of, I imagine it being
Well,
like,
that's true. That's true. But I think
well, like you
Yeah.
see this horrible fate coming,
right.
and
I mean, but it's part of the
spend
character's.
energy.
It's part of the character's backstory that they've already done this once.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is season 2, so they've already jumped once.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, well, and of course we could frame it as not literally a different universe. It could be I've seen something that's faded, but it's so kind of locked in that if I change it, it's, if everyone has seen Across the Multiverse, or Across the Spider-Verse yet, it's a canon event. I know it will, like, there is so much fate lending itself to this particular thing happening that if I change it, it will hurt me. Could be something like that, but I like Clock Stopper, so I think that's what I would be picking.
My thought on, like, if it changed, it'll hurt me. Almost kind of like with Terminator and trying to stop Skynet. It's like, all you can do is delay it.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, I think last of all of us, right? Yeah, is the unlikely hero an unproven prospect and heartfelt companion? Hopeful, honest, and unproven, the unlikely hero does their best to keep up with their companions. They carry great potential within them, but will that potential be realized? They struggle with the weight of their destiny and bear the hope that they will one day change the world. You play an unlikely hero, you earn XP when you address a challenge with compassion or honesty. Get in over your head and trust that your friends will be there to see you through. What future do you hope for? What do you fear will be your undoing? Who will save you when you overreach? Your mundane name. So the true name is interesting with this one. I will talk a bit about how this works, but a mundane name would be innocent name or pretty name. True name would be sacred name or renowned name. You make a naive promise and an impossible promise. When you eclipse, you are not who they need you to be. You're weak, useless, unworthy of their friendship. They have given so much to you, and in return, you give them nothing. You throw yourself into danger, desperately seeking any way you might possibly be of use. You escape eclipse only when someone engages you in a dialogue about your feelings and shows you that they have felt the same. You start with points in confess and forgive. You begin with only mortal, which is you cannot transcend and you cannot have special armor. You get an additional action during downtime. You get +1d when rolling to make a connection. When only you can save one of your friends from fatal harm or severe consequence, and you do it, you discard this ability and gain Hero's Destiny instead. So that is kind of one of the ways that character can shift. And then you would choose one more between Hero's Destiny. Well, Hero's Destiny, you don't choose that one, but you can get to it. And then Call Out, Worth Saving, Heartfelt, and Believe in Me is one of those.
Yeah, I think that I've chosen the name Zane for him. For Zane, I think the one that makes best is Worth Saving. Is the one that makes the most sense.
Yeah, so when you run foolishly into danger and no one comes to help you, mark XP. but also your allies roll +1d when they protect you from consequences. Yeah, cool. And then so you don't have any transcendent abilities, but when you change only mortal for Hero's Destiny, you immediately gain one transcendent ability taken from another playbook. And then you can eventually get more. But so the Hero's Destiny, I didn't read it, but when you change it and you get that, you have embraced your heroic destiny, you get increased effect when fighting your most powerful foes, gain +1d when rolling while in eclipse. You may only transcend when an ally suffers consequences from an action. Immediately mark one transcendent ability on your playbook when you gain this ability. I'm a little interested how that works, like the eclipse part, because so I guess you would never be able to go into eclipse until you've got the hero's destiny and can do transcendent things.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I was just trying to make sure I understood how that would work. Okay. Cool. So now going back to some of these other questions, there's the transcendence. Like, what does it feel like to transcend? What aspect of it is shared by everyone? With, I guess, the exception of the person who doesn't do it. What is different for each of us? Your transcendence is an expression of your truest self. How? Well, we kind of already talked about, like, constellation themed, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Trying to think. For my character, what would be an appropriate constellation?
Well, we also have described a place that is not necessarily Earth, so we don't necessarily have to go with real constellations.
Yeah.
That being said, there's a long history of using Earth terms for these things.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, like, with names for my character, I picked a true name, from our history.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I was just so I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt. I'm just to tie back to what Nobilis was saying. I was wondering if we want to lean in or lean out of the kind of real world astrology stuff. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, and one of the things to do is that we don't have to use constellations. We can also use the names of individual stars.
Yeah, that's
like
true.
Vega and Deneb and there's all. I mean, there's a Wikipedia page and there's just lists and lists and lists.
Well, yeah, I mean, like Sailor Moon is just using like the planets, and like there's not necessarily even really any specific connection to which planet they are. Like it doesn't matter which one it is.
And
and the thing
one
is
of them
that
isn't even a planet.
a lot of these old Arabic names just are terrific names. I mean, like
Mm-hmm.
Zubin El Ganubi.
Okay.
Um, I feel like, um, well, and then what maybe something also to add into the mix of this is that is the reminder that we're kind of dealing with petty gods as like the adversary, right? So some of that kind of ties into some of the same sort of mythological underpinnings that we sometimes
Yeah.
use to describe stars and planets.
So, um, when you when they say describe how transcendence feels, what
Mm-hmm.
like what
Yes.
uh, I guess I'm not sure what's meant by that.
Well, I think it's literally we're all, when we transcend in the story, are going through a kind of transformation, right? And so like if we were doing the one where we're mecha pilots, when you transcend is basically when you go and get in your mech, right? But for us, it would be like the Sailor Moon style is, it is when you have decided that the time and the fight has come, and you get your own little cutscene where your appearance changes and you are activating and seizing your power.
Hmm.
There's a really good Rick and Morty episode where they do that animation. It's excellent in this new season. It's like, we got to reuse that animation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean
Well,
that's a classic thing, is that every single time the character transforms, you use the same clip.
Yeah.
I mean, it saves a lot on animation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the She-Ra Netflix show did that too. Yeah, which is that show is all very much also a magical girl thing.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. I mean,
Reminds
so
me, I need to go back and finish that.
Yeah, I thought it ended really well, actually. But in any case, I think so. The idea, though, is that it's asking us, when that's happening, what does it feel like? And I think most shows depict it as being a very empowering, exciting sort of
well,
your invigorating thing.
I mean, like um, embodiments of the stars, like you feel like you're filled with starlight
Mm-hmm.
and
Well, I mean,
whatever.
and I think also to go back to the themes of uh, similar to like He-Man and other, your physical body transforms into
Mm-hmm.
something more powerful
Yeah.
in the course of the transcendence, to kind of touch on that theme of
Right.
natures and bodies and
Yeah,
things like
like a
that.
big, we kind of skipped over some of the discussion of this earlier in the book, but it's just a reminder too that part of what's supposed to be happening here is that there is supposed to be some part of ourselves, our true selves, that we have to keep secret most of the time. But our transcendent form should be an expression of that, of the true self that we sometimes have to keep hidden for your character, right? And so like, for mine, an example of that might just be like her interest in like the prophecy and the stars and all of that sort of stuff is something that nobody else seems to care about. And I don't mean like the rest of the protagonists, but I mean it's like it is not merely of no interest to others, but is seen as a waste of time and distasteful. And so having to kind of keep that to themselves or risk people's disfavor, it might be something that like her transcendent form is, all the like there maybe there's a big third eye, and it's just all the more themed on like her like she almost becomes like a silhouette with with actual stars at the joints and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But like, also like bigger and stronger. So that's an example.
Yeah. Uh, hmm. Go ahead.
No, okay, I was just thinking, because of uh, what I'm choosing to do with the harmony.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the secret then becomes, I've named my the two parts of the whole is Isolde was um, the girl,
Mm-hmm.
the original human girl, and Ceto was the villain for season 1.
Mm-hmm.
Where Ceto, according to what I looked up, goddess of the dangers of the sea. She is the specifically identified as the goddess of sharks, whales, and sea monsters.
Hmm.
Nice.
So I want to think that part of the transformation is expressing that somehow, but I'm not
Well,
quite sure how.
so question: when you are not transcended, are you are I'm assuming you are not split into two. But do you look just like one or the other? Do you look like a
Yeah.
combined person, or do you maybe look like the human part of yourself, and you're having to hide the other half of yourself?
Yeah, I think it's I think that mostly what Isolde has to do as part of the harmony is to keep pretending that nothing has changed.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe some of what has changed is, hey, she actually wants to go in the water.
Mm.
No one else does. um, but
Yeah, so like if the ocean is kind of seen as a bad, scary thing, like the water is bad, then like a water theme for the transcended form could be cool.
yeah, um,
Or were you thinking more like the ocean creatures part?
I was actually thinking more of a mermaid thing, but
Hmm.
but I'm still pondering that bit of
Mm-hmm.
it. But that's kind of where my brain is going. That,
Mm-hmm.
not the mermaid in the fact that she has to have a tail, but in the fact that she has to spend a certain portion of her day in the
Mm.
water, or else she gets very, very uncomfortable.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, my character, um, the idea that um, the transcendence is supposed to uh, express the hidden part of themselves
Mm-hmm.
is honestly quite literal because they are trans.
Okay.
Uh, you know, assigned male at birth, um, and their transcendent form is female.
Nice.
And uh, the name, true name is Godiva,
Ah.
Lady
There you go.
Godiva, and appears as essentially a nude woman with like fabric ribbons that kind of cover.
Okay.
Yeah, and with a basically a mask that's just like a blank, kind of a blank face.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. All right. So we still need Jason's transcendence, and then I guess we need to think about does Nobilis's character have some sort of an equivalent? Like, I guess not that you have a transcendent form, but that like what is the expression of this idea for your character?
Um, the true name that I chose is Perseus.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Perseus is, his constellation is constantly chasing Andromeda, who is threatened by Cetus the whale. Those three constellations are in the sky together, and Andromeda is the heroine who needs to be saved, and Perseus is the one to go and defeat it. So the fact that you chose Ceto, which is the feminine form of Cetus, um, was like, ding.
Do you have a love? Are you in a love triangle with the two parts of Lee's character?
I'm thinking that that's where it goes. That's like at least at the beginning. Things change when you play, but
Yeah.
it's um uh, uh, uh oh, it's he doesn't know about their dual nature and the transcendent thing at first, and he meets them in separate contexts, and keeps and probably goes to one of the other characters like, well, I'm really like, you know this one, but oh my god, have you seen so and so? And that being like a source of drama, at least early on, until he learns of the
Well,
fusion.
so I mean, I think that like if we're imagining that as season one story, like
Oh,
they
okay,
would
maybe
have
it was season one story, and
right, they were
now
separate and now they're
yeah,
not. And so you're
yeah.
struggling with maybe you were in love with one and hated the other because they're a villain, and now this is complicated.
Yeah, 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 and
Now it's
and
complicated.
Yeah.
especially if the villain did something terrible to me in season one,
Mm,
right? And I have to forgive that
mm-hmm,
in order for my relationship with this character
mm-hmm.
to progress.
Yeah. See,
And
I named her Sold for a reason.
So, how do you spell that name?
which
Isolde?
one?
Isolde.
Isolde?
Okay.
Is. Yeah. I'm
Okay.
thinking Tristan and Isolde.
Is
The
it
origin of Romeo and Juliet.
DE at the end or no?
I think that it is DE.
Yeah,
Yeah, oh yeah.
that's what I thought. Yeah,
Oh.
but yeah, I no, I just thought you hadn't said the E at the end, so I that's why I
Yeah.
was. It's fine. Okay, cool. What about you, Jason?
So their transcendent form was going to be something akin to like a druid almost, like because of their ability to find secrets.
Mm-hmm.
They have clothing that is like, since we're kind of in a Venice-y, post-apocalyptic kind of place, it's different type of animal pelts and leathers and things that a lot of people haven't seen, which also why is he's a stranger, because they're like, nature's not good.
Hmm.
And when he eclipses, he becomes something akin to a swamp thing, because his transcendence abilities, like Ex Machina, have to deal with like vines and growing plants.
Nice. So remind me what you had chosen the enemy turned friend role, but like
Yes.
remind me where your mundane character was coming from.
Oh, he's because of his ability to find secrets, he kind of, he's not a, I don't say, because they don't have land to farm, but he's more of a person who kind of harvests from like the water and like some of these underground caves, because once he figured out, like when we found our little hideaway,
Mm-hmm.
he
So
started looking for other places.
you're one
But
of the rare people who is kind of like was living kind of entirely separate from this whole way of life that we were talking about until well, but then I guess why are you here?
yeah, it's because I, oh, by the way, that's the I, because I figured out one of my promises. It's to find a way to unify, instead of us, instead of nature being taboo and we focus on edifices and organizations, more unify them, so that way, instead of worrying about nature destroying the last remains of our society, we find a way to help both of those prop each other up. Which is why he's also a friend, enemy turned friend, because I like the idea where you said he was an actual like Zuko type character.
Excuse me. Okay, so what if? Okay, yeah. So Well, all right, yeah. Cuz so do you want to be someone who is literally a minion of the adversary, or do you think that they were maybe just so maybe you were part of some other community that got destroyed and that's why you came to ours, or what are you thinking?
Ooh, maybe it's because my building was destroyed because we sided with nature. Like we didn't like the
Oh,
the
like you
the
surrendered it.
yes.
Okay, interesting.
And so and because of that, very much a taboo thing, and I'm very much so stranger to the people here because again, that no one would ever think of that being like, yeah, we'll just no.
Well,
Why
but
do we
like
need to
how do you
hold on to
feel
this?
about that now? Have you decided that was not the right thing, or
It's very conflicting of me, which is why I enjoyed the idea of a Gemini style sign of twins because he's of a two minds about this.
hmm.
Because he's made friends here, he's made some sort of familial sort of relationship with everyone, but he still knows where he came from
Hmm.
and what they felt and believe, and he still enjoys plants, but he also understands that like
Well, I so my thinking about it is just that I feel like you've established why you would be perceived as an enemy, but where's the friend part?
ooh, trying to think
So
maybe
perhaps um maybe it was a situation where like you thought that you could make some sort of an appeasement to this the adversary, that they wouldn't take everything. Like you could give them part of it and they wouldn't take everything, but then they did.
mm. So I felt betrayed by them because we put our trust in them.
Yeah. Or like you thought that the only way to end the sort of the conflict was to say, well, what if we stop doing the things like keeping well I mean I like
Oh,
or what if you surrender parts of the building and you stop opposing places where natural change was happening to the building, because it could be like the non supernatural part of it is literally like what if you just stop trying to prevent every single natural incursion into the structure of the building, but the result was that the entire building collapsed.
yeah, because it was I was like, well, if they grow it, it maybe will sturdy it, or like kind of like how
Mm-hmm.
some old dilapidated buildings are held together by overgrowth and things.
Mm-hmm.
Except in this one, it kind of just ate the building.
So does this tie in with the things that you've got as the stranger?
Oh yeah,
Yeah. All right.
I enjoy this idea, and I also like the idea of that the same place that we kind of hang out is the where we thought we were walking to the garden, little air garden.
Mm-hmm.
To now we're like, wait a minute, where are we? So yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. Okay, so one of the things that it asks here, and I kind of touched on it earlier, is how do we transgress against that which is sacred? And how do we represent that which is profane? And I think we've kind of been using some of that already. But, certainly, um, I think, thinking of that and having that be part of the theme, right, is the idea of like for my character, if the what's sacred is like the edifices and the organization and the idea that she's looking for a bigger world much outside of this community, and that's what she wants to think about, that is definitely not respecting the uh, sacredness of the buildings. um, and then as far as representing what was profane, so what we said was profane was bodies and nature, right?
Yeah.
And so the idea that we are all part of one big universe and that it all matters, like the stars can matter even to us here on the on this building. um That's kind of what I was thinking. And then broadly speaking, obviously our group already has that neat tension where we think that this entire, this full-throated opposition to all of nature is bad, but also right now, you know, the avatars of nature are trying to destroy us. We don't think that should happen either.
And, for my character, representation of what's profane is quite, uh, like kind of thought of with bodies, like
Mm-hmm.
the idea is to cover up and not show yourself,
Yeah, yeah.
to appear as essentially a nude person.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Like,
and that definitely plays into the whole sort of flashy nature of the
oh yeah,
Enigma
Yeah.
character. Yeah.
I think that's probably gonna have to be a theme for most of us.
Mm-hmm.
Like for instance, I the there's a pair of stars in the middle of the constellation Cetus called where was it? Uh Bent Baten Kaitos. And I'm like, that sounds like Benten. so so basically, where your character David is all, with the nude form with the ribbons, Baten Kaitos is the nude figure with strategically placed coins on ropes.
okay,
and, and
okay.
that can even inform, what kind of weapons we use. Like, I would think that Banten's weapon would be like a trident, which is historically, representative of those the water deities.
Yeah. Um, oh, and my character's mundane name is John. And if we're going for a last name, my thought's John Bracer. Yeah, because his you know his family just kind of braces things.
Mm-hmm.
That's a
Okay.
role in maintaining the building.
Cool. So,
Yeah.
oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's fine.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I kind of covered mine. I didn't want
Yeah.
to. I didn't. You didn't really kind of. What are you thinking about your character for that stuff?
For
Yeah.
for which
Well, how do
well
you
like
transgress against that which is sacred? How do you represent that which is profane? Just because you don't transcend doesn't mean you don't still have something that
okay.
you hide when you're doing ordinary stuff, but you can express when you're doing extravagant stuff.
Hmm. Um
And it can also reflect our broad mission, right? That all of
yeah.
that sort of thing.
Um hmm. I think um like in season 1, um Zane was really like obedient to his intended mission of meeting all the eligible folks in the building and kind of kind of a debutante sort of role, like he's supposed to um, uh,
He's spouse hunting.
spouse hunting, but and he's not supposed to let like he's supposed to find a good match, right? He's
Mm-hmm.
supposed to find a good match, not just a good match emotionally, but one that's a useful allegiance for his family back on his previous building. And instead, he fell in love with weirdo, uh, who's not part of the establishment,
Mm-hmm.
who's kind of an iconoclast, um, and so kind of fulfilled his role and betrayed it at the same time. Um, uh, and uh, and he's um, you know wasn't supposed to let something as base as physical attraction uh, rule him, but he did that anyways. Um, and and yeah, I guess that's the best I can do right now. I think
Sure,
I'd have to
no,
find more of it and
that's
play.
okay. Sure, yeah. I mean,
Uh, what age are our characters?
Young,
Like young adult?
I mean, they
young
don't
adult.
have to
Yeah.
be, but certainly I think it's entirely appropriate for. I mean, often they are young adult. Like high school is like one of the standard settings, right? But it could absolutely be, you know, uh,
Well, like early 20s.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, late,
Okay.
I would say late teens, early 20s
Yeah,
ish,
sure.
somewhere in there.
I recently read a book called The Fourth Wing, which was sort of a very tropey, magic boarding school sort of thing where everyone's training to become dragon riders, and it's like it's good. I don't want to be dismissive of it, but I definitely described the age range as everyone's 20 so they can have sex.
Yeah.
Because it's just like they definitely wanted to do that part, and so let's just like make sure that everybody is, is an age where
Well,
it's
I
not going to be a
figure
problem.
with
Yeah.
imagery from my character, it's a good thing to make sure of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In any case, though, like I think all that's fine. So uh, there's the ultimate destiny. What are we striving for? What calamity do we seek to prevent? What great change are we destined to bring? I think we've kind of talked about that, but I think given that we're pretty close, we're basically right at our standard end time. Maybe we can finish with the part that says choose a name for the series that reflects all of these answers. So if all of this that we've kind of talked about is a TV show, what's the name of that TV show?
Hmm.
um,
I mean, stars seems like it's a good word to figure in or work something around.
Between stars and ocean,
Hmm?
or between water and stars, or maybe, or
okay. This is a little obscure. It's a little obscure.
Uh huh.
Um, uh, Sextant.
Hmm.
Oh, yeah.
ooh,
Kind of an ocean thing and a navigation thing and a
Yeah.
And a
yeah.
star
Stars thing.
thing, and
Yeah.
it's got the word sex in it. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
And a sextant was what they used to find their way.
Yeah.
And that is what the
I f-
characters are doing. They're finding their way.
I like that. I feel like what I'm reaching for is some other word to pair with it, like blank and sextant, or
or
sextant and something. Um,
Sextant and monsters.
well,
um,
or some adjective.
mm,
Okay.
or
Um,
structure and sextant.
hmm.
Hmm.
But, I mean, man, and we got our power. So we're getting our powers from the stars. You know, there is Makoto Shinkai did a film by the name of Voices of a Distant Star. And so I was thinking something along that if we were getting our
Yeah.
powers from the stars.
And I was thinking like the bridges between buildings is like bridging the stars, or star scrapers.
Yes.
I was thinking something with horizon in it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because that's the boundary between what we can see of the sky and then the ocean.
Mm.
Heroes among the horizon.
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of good stuff
Why am
in
I
here.
going? Why am I stuck on alliteration?
I don't know. Well, because alliteration's good. I
Yeah,
mean,
it
it's
is.
yeah. Um,
makes stuff stand out and makes it memorable.
mhm. Um, let's see. Hmm. Yeah, I don't know, because like something and sextants, like especially if it was another S word, feel that would be meaningful. Feels like that would be great. Um,
Secrets and Sextant.
secrets and
Sea,
sextants. Yeah.
sea monsters and sextants. Although that actually sounds more like a board game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
I
it
kind
doesn't
of
have to
like.
be an and either. It could be just an adjective or
Yeah.
um,
Sextant of the stars.
Secret sextant.
okay.
Hey, Secret
Knights of the
Sextant.
Sextant or some other word
Mhm.
that is heroes of the Sextant or something like that.
What about the Sextant's secret?
Hmm.
Maybe in the center of
Yeah.
our little
Like
hideout.
yeah,
there's a
maybe
pedestal
that
of a
would maybe
sextant.
part of that ties into our ritual that we do to access our whole thing, like, or like it could have tied into how we got our abilities and how we go into our hideout and all of that. Like it would prominently feature in the opening credits.
Oh yeah, and like there's you could do maybe like a pedestal that has like a sextant on it, and that could be like the centerpiece of the theme song as it's like doing its thing. Kind of like how you sometimes have like they'll use a clock face to show the passage of a opening sequence in a show or something.
Yeah.
And it could also be like an integral part of the transformation sequence.
Well,
Yeah.
like it also, there are plenty of anime that go in one of two directions. One is nonsense names that seem vaguely thematic but don't really make any actual sense. And having some incongruous adjective to go with sextant might fall into that category. But then there's also that time we got chosen by the stars to fight nature's poisoned heart.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I never really understood how or why they had such why some shows have such literal names like
Well,
that.
because people like it and think it's funny. I mean,
right.
that's why. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's any more complicated than that. Some show did it first, and people liked that and thought it was funny, and so now other shows copy it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, long titles, and it's become the kind of the like the yeah, like that it's become a living meme because like there's like oh god there's what is it wrong to try to pick up girls in a dungeon?
Yeah.
I promised I you said I promised in my new life I'd have weaker skills or something like there's in my next life I promised to be a demon lord. Like there's a lot
Yeah.
So I just Googled longest anime titles. My next life as a villainess, all routes lead to doom. The Genius Prince's Guide to Raising a Nation Out of Debt. Is it wrong to try to pick up girls in a dungeon? Suppose
kid from the in Booney Town or in Dungeon Booney Town, I think it
well,
was.
so suppose it was literally the next one on the list. Suppose a kid from the last dungeon boonies moved to a starter town.
But here's the king. Here's the king. The misfit of Demon King Academy, hero's strongest demon king, reincarnates and goes to school with his descendants.
Oh god, it's terrible. I've seen all of these. Is it wrong to try to pick up girls in the dungeon? Is excellent though. It is a surprisingly good show.
Yeah.
Kochikame, this is the police station in front of Kamari Park in Katsushika Ward.
Such a specific title.
Oh, okay. World End, : what do you do at the end of the world? ? Are you busy? ? Will you save us ?
At one point, will there be a title that would take up the entire
Oh, yeah. I mean,
box of DVDs?
it seems
Someone will
obvious.
literally do that just to get that accolade.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
and not being a larger print.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, Times New Roman 10 10-point
Yeah.
font.
Mm-hmm.
It will be a literal paragraph.
Yeah.
The stars told me I have to fight the ocean.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I like that. Yeah.
Yes.
and incongruously, there is a sextant in the middle of this
Oh.
the thing.
Oh,
It could
the
be.
emblem of
It
the
could
show.
be sextant : the stars told me I have to fight the ocean.
Yes!
I know what our little animal sidekick thing is a little roly-poly version of Ursa Minor.
Oh,
Nice.
Little bear
I do
cub.
be
A
there.
little shiny golden bear cub that only that is trying to get in the building and cause trouble, and sometimes that causes hijinks.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
I'm gonna
Okay,
have to
so
write that down. I like that one.
yeah, that's pretty good. Just to, because I think we're going to wrap up here quickly, but just to look ahead, like the other things that we would be doing if we were continuing, we would choose a series ability, which is something that, like, as a group, we all get a certain power. Things like never alone. Protagonists may use teamwork regardless of the distance separating them. Or shrine keepers. You have to gain a new downtime activity, maintain the secret shrine, where that one's fun because it's basically one character, and it can be any of us, has to choose that as one of your downtime activities. And if someone does it, we all get a benefit. But basically, someone in our group has to sacrifice one of their own downtime actions in order to do it. And then you get different abilities depending on which kind of shrine it is. So stuff like that. Then there's also, like, part of playing, we have our hideout as discussed, but we can, during downtime activities, we can expand it and add new, like, rooms to it that give us different benefits and that sort of.
Or discover them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then we would look at, some of the different tiers and that sort of thing. But so that is Girl by Moonlight.
That looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah. And so there's
many games, so little time.
Yes. So it does a lot of things that, just for my own interest, since we're close to finishing Radiant Citadel, I'm still personally feeling like I want to do some Apocalypse Keys. So that's kind of where I'm leaning.
Yes.
But this game does have a lot of elements that are similar to what I like about Apocalypse Keys. So, it's one that I might be interested in looking at again at some point. But, but in the meantime, if anyone's interested and it's not too late, as of the recording, which is the 17th of June, there are 5 days left in its backerkit.com crowdfunding campaign. And like I said, it's already been, met its goal by a lot, and a bunch of stretch goals and stuff like that too. But if you want to go ahead and get access to the preview edition yourself, that's how you do it. And we just got a chat from H Monk saying, I'm really glad you all did a look at this. It looks like a great game. Thank you. Yes, we agree. I want to watch Sextant. The stars told me I have to fight the ocean. So like that's kind of I think maybe where we'll wrap up. And I think our hope is that we'll have everybody next week, and we will have if not I don't know how many sessions there are going to be left of that campaign, but it's not very many. It's in the single digits for sure. We are heading towards the climax, and I think we'll have to see just how long that kind of takes to actually happen. But tune in next week for that because that's been a great campaign. Journeys through the Radiant Citadel, excellent book. Okay, so anyone else have anything to finish with before we wrap up for tonight? Thoughts about Girl by Moonlight that we haven't said already?
I'm disappointed we're not actually going to play it right away.
Aw.
Yeah, I want to play this particular one because
I mean, we can talk about it, but we also just haven't done the Apocalypse Key stuff recently either. I think if we dig back into it, hopefully
think,
everyone
yeah.
will be excited by that again too. So
Oh yeah, oh,
Right,
I'm
yeah.
I have my stuff for it right over here, and I keep like picking up, looking. Oh man, come on!
yeah.
So,
Yeah, if anyone's curious too, there's I ran a session of Apocalypse Keys for the Bag of Giving charity stream, and that went great. So if anyone's kind of a little curious, like what that's like, you can look that up too. But in the meantime,
yes.
we will be back next week for more adventures on so many levels.
So many levels.